Notes and Queries, number 175, March 5, 1853. By various. So hissed by the critical throng. Been spent upon mending the holes in my coat. It had not been ragged so long. Roe blushed, and made way for diminutive Pope, whom Shakespeare addressed with a frown, and said, "Some apology sure I may hope from you and your friend in the gown. Had the murderous knife which my plays has destroyed, by lopping full many a scene, to make you a lover like him, been employed?" How flat Cibber's letter had been! Pope sneaked off confounded, and Hammer drew near, whose softness a savage might melt. So Shakespeare said only, "Sir Thomas, I fear, with gloves on, my beauties you felt." Supported by Caxton, Winkin upheld. Text Tybalt crept forward to sight. "Is this," quoth the poet, "the thing that rebelled, and dared even Pope to the fight? To kennel, good Tib, for a time will arrive, when all in their senses shall know, that half of your consequence, Tib, you derive from the lash of so envied a foe. 800 old plays thou declar'st thou hast read. How couldst thou the public so cozen? Yet the traces I see, spite of what thou hast said, of not many more than a dozen. If all thou hast dug, how could Farmer, my Tib, or Stevens, find gold in the mine? Thy trade of attorney sure taught thee to fib, and truth was no client of thine. And yet to appease me for all thou hast done, and show thou art truly my friend, go watch, and to me with intelligence run, when Johnson and Capel descend. For Johnson, with all his mistakes, I must love, even love from the injured he gains. But Capel a comrade for dullness will prove, and him thou mayst take for thy pains. Edward F. Rimbault. Edward F. Rimbault. Return. The Biter, an attempt at comedy by Roe, which was received with that contempt which it well deserved. Return. Theobald, in the preface to his first edition of Shakespeare, asserts that, exclusive of the works of Beaumont and Fletcher and Ben Jonson, he had read above 800 plays, to ascertain the uncommon and obsolete phrases in his author. The reader who can discover the fruits of this boasted industry in his notes may safely believe him, and those who cannot may surely claim the liberty, like myself, to doubt somewhat of his veracity. This assertion, however, Theobald had sufficient modesty to omit in the preface to his second edition, together with all the criticisms on Greek authors, which I am assured he had collected from such papers of Mr. Wycherley as had been entrusted to his care for very different purposes. It is much to be questioned whether there are 500 old plays extant, by the most accurate perusal of which the works of Shakespeare could receive advantage. I mean of dramas prior, contemporary, or within half a century before and after his own. Swedish words current in England. In the summer of 1847 I mentioned to my friend Professor Retzius at Stockholm certain Scandinavian words in use at Whitby, with which he was much pleased, they not being akin to the German. I have since been mostly in the south of Europe, but have not lost sight of these words, and last spring I wrote out in Switzerland upwards of 500 Swedish words, which greatly resemble the English, Lowland Scots, and C, but I doubt many of them have the same root with the German correspondence. I now beg you kindly to offer to the notice of our Anglo-Saxon and Icelandic scholars, as well as the estimable northern savans at Copenhagen and elsewhere, the following words in use at Whitby, and I believe throughout Cleveland and Cumberland, where the local accent and manner of speaking is the same. Ag orm, Swedish, viper, ag worm, Whitby, prawnworm, blowbear, bilberry, blueberry. By village, as a termination to names of towns, occurs, perhaps, more frequently in this district than in others. There are some places in Cleveland called Lund and Upsal. Back brook, back. Jevel, devil, pronounced exactly in the Swedish manner at Whitby. Dolig, poorly, dowly. Eldon. Tinderbox, applied to faggots. Furs, waterfall, spelt force and foss in Yorkshire books. Full, ugly. Prawn fool, usually associated with bigness in Cleveland. Phone, silly, prawn fond at Whitby. Giller, snare, gilder. Gapin, handful, gaupen. Har, grayling, carling in Rydell. Ket, flesh, ket, applied to coarse meat. Lack play, at Whitby, to lake dot, leda, to seek, to late at Whitby dot, lie scythe prom lie dot, lingen, red bilberry, call the lingberry dot, ljung, ling dot, lop, a flea dot, neb, beak, neb dot, scaft, handle, scaft dot, scare, rock, Whitby scar dot, smitta, to infect, to smit dot, strandgata, creek, at Whitby got dot, stayed, anvil, steady dot, sef, a rush, siv dot, charn, pool, tarn dot, enska, to wish for, we say to set one in anska, i.e. longing or wishing. Will any one inform me which of the above are Anglo-Saxon words? I may add that there are many French words in the Swedish for aught I know, some of them Norman. As we find German words in the Italian, we may expect to find Scandinavian in the French. Charles Watkins. Charles Watkins. Sir David Lindsay's Viridarium. In Lord Lindsay's very interesting Lives of the Lindsays, Volume 1, page 347, after the description of the very curious Viridarium or garden of Sir David Lindsay at Edzell, and of the various sculptures and ornaments with which its wall is decorated, the author says, to show how insecure was enjoyment in that dawn of refinement, the center of every star along the wall forms an embrasure for the extrusion, if needed, of arrow, harquebus, or pistol. Some years before the book was published, I had visited this very interesting spot, and examined these sculptures, and other ornaments, amongst which the pierced stars puzzled me much. However, after a lengthened and very careful investigation, finding that, being at too great a height from the ground, and moreover, that as the holes in the center of the stars do not pass through the wall, but merely into small cavities in it, they could not have been used as embrasures, or have served for warlike purposes, and that, as there were no channels or pipes that could have conducted water to them, they could not have been connected with fountains or waterworks. I came to the conclusion that the planner of the garden, or at least of its walls, must have been an ardent lover of birds, and that these holes were for providing access for his beloved feathered friends. They would only admit the passage of small birds to the secure resting places which the hollow stones afforded, for whose use other niches and recesses seem also to have been planned, though some of the latter were probably intended to hold beehives, with a philonithic indifference for the security of the fruit tempting their attacks from all sides, but quite in character with the portrait of Sir David, as depicted by his noble biographer. W. C. Trevelyan. W. C. Trevelyan. Athenaeum. Minor notes. Unlucky days. The subjoined lines on certain days of the several months, I copied some years ago from a MS, on the fly-leaf of an old Spanish breviary, then in the possession of an Irish priest. Though either their grammar nor prosody are first-rate, yet they may be worthy of preservation as a curiosity. I may add that they appear to have been written by a Trinitarian brother of redemption, in the early part of the 16th century. January. Prima dies mensis, et septima truncat in ensis. February. Quarta subit mortem, prosternit tertia sortem. March. Primus mandentum, disrumpit quarta bibentum. April. Dinis et undinus est mortis vulnere plenus. May. Tertius occidet et septimus ora relidit. June. Dinis palessit quindinus fodera nescit. July. Turdecimus mactat, Julii dinis labefactat. August. Prima necat fortem prosternit secunda cohortum. September. Tertia septembris, et dinis fert mala membris. October. Tertius et dinis est sicut mors alienis. November. Scorpius est quintus, et tertius inis cinctus. December. Septimus exanguis, virosus dinis et anguis. W. Pinkerton. W. Pinkerton. Ham. The Pancake Bell. At the Huntingdonshire village from which I now write, the little bell of the church is annually rung for 10 minutes on Shrove Tuesday, at 11 o'clock in the morning. This is called the Pancake Bell. Cuthbert Bede, B.A. Cuthbert Bede. Quoits. The vulgar pronunciation of the irons used in this game is quoits. From the following passage in a letter from Sir Thomas Browne to Ashmole, it is probable that the word was formerly thus spelt. Count Rosenberg played at quoits, with silver quoits made by projection as before. Unada. Unada. Philadelphia. The family of Townerall. One great advantage of N&Q is not only that inquiries may be made and information obtained by those who are engaged in any research, but also that such persons as happen to possess information on a particular subject may make it known before it is sought or asked for. I therefore beg to inform any person that may be interested in the family of Townerall that there is in the library of Trinity College, Dublin, a Latin MS. Bible, which belonged to Rolf Townerall, who on the 17th of June 1585 was married to Anne Hartgrain, at Revesby, in Lincolnshire, and that at the end of this Bible are recorded the births, deaths, and marriages of his children and other members of his family, from the date above mentioned to 1638. James H. Todd. James H. Todd. Trin. Call. Dublin. History of Formosa. The writer of the fictitious History of Formosa, inquired about at Volume 7, page 86, was George Psalmanazar, himself a fiction, almost. And this reference to Wiseman's lectures reminds me that your correspondent R.T., Volume 7, page 62, who discovered the metrical version of that passage of St. Bernard in Fulk Greville's poem, was, to say the least, anticipated by the Cardinal, in the magnificent peroration to the last of those lectures upon science and revealed religion. R.T. B. B. Woodward. B. B. Woodward. Notes on newspapers. The following may be worth a place among your notes. I copied it from the Evening Mail, a tri-weekly issue from the Times office, but unfortunately omitted to take the date, and the only authority I can offer is Evening Mail, No. 12,686. Page 8. Colonel 2. Leader. The Times has its share of antiquities. Our office stands upon the foundations of Blackfriars, where for centuries Plantagenets, Yorkists, Lancastrians, and Tudors held court. We have reason to believe that just about where we sit was heard that famous cause for annulling the marriage of Catherine, which led to the English Reformation. Under these foundations others still older are now open to view. First we have under us the Norman wall of the city, before it was extended westward to give more room to Blackfriars, and under that presents itself the unmistakable material and composition of the old Roman wall. T.B. T.B. Queries. Wild plants and their names. In looking over some memoranda, I find the following queries entered, and, as it is more than probable that some of the readers of N&Q, who take an interest in our wild flowers, and love the simple, homely names which were given them by our fathers, will easily solve them, I send them for insertion. 1. Capsella bursa pastoris. Shepherd's purse. Why was this plant called St. James's wort? French. Fleur de St. Jacques? Was it used in medicine? Its old name, per man's parmacetic, would imply that it was. 2. Veronica comadres. Eyebright Paul's Bettany. And Fluellen. What was the origin of these two names? 3. Primula veris. Cowslip palsy wort. French. Herb de la paralysie. Is this plant used in any of our village pharmacopoeias as a remedy for palsy, and if so, how? I may also add another query on this plant, and which I trust some fair reader will answer, and that is, how is the ointment prepared from the leaves, which is used to remove tan and freckles from the sunburnt? 4. Viburnum opulus. Guelder rose. Was this plant originally a native of the Low Countries? I am inclined to think that its distribution was of a very wide range. 5. Neodia spiralis. Ladies' tresses, sweet cods, sweet cullens, and stander grass. What is the origin of these names? 6. Rebes nigrum. Black currant. Gazel Kent. Meaning? 7. Stellaria holostia. Stitchwort all bones. Meaning? The plant is very fragile. 8. Orobus tuberosus. Bitter vetch. Cornwall, Highlands of Scotland, and Napperts, Scotland generally. Have these terms any signification? 9. Sinapis arvensis. Wild mustard, charlock, garlock, chadlock, and runch. Derivation and meaning? 10. Saxifraga umbrosa. London pride, saxifrage, St. Patrick's cabbage. Is there a legend in connection with this name, and in what county is this saxifrage so called? 11. Geum urbanum. Yellow Avens, Herb Bennet, Star of the North, Blessed Herb. These names would appear to point to some virtues supposed to be attached to this herb. What are they? 12. Linum catharticum. Purge flax. Mill mountain? 13. Sedum acre. Biting stone crop, Jack of the buttery, pricket, bird's bread. 14. Naphalium germanicum. Common cudweed. Wicked herb, herba impia. Live long. And chaffweed. 15. Euphorbia helioscopia. Sun spurge, churn staff. Juice milky, but acrid. 16. Euphorbia sapariceus. Cypress spurge, welcome to our house. 17. Chrysanthemum sigidum. Wild marigold, Gowls. Gullens, query remains of its old name gold? St. John's bloom. Ruds? 18. Spergula arvensis, Spiyar Scotch. 19. Chenopodium bonus Henricus. Mercury goosefoot, good King Henry. To all the latter the same query will apply: what is the origin of the name? It is probable but few of the above names will be now found, or, if found, it will be only in those districts where the march of intellect has not banished all traces of household surgery, home legends, and I may almost add, home feelings. Much that is interesting to the antiquary and the naturalist is now fast fading out of the land. The very existence of the cheap literature of the day will rapidly root out all traces of traditionary lore, and strong, steady efforts should be made to rescue as much as possible of it from oblivion. It is with this view I send these queries, and in case they are deemed worthy of insertion, I purpose to follow them up by a second list of queries, as to the medical virtues of our wild plants. In the meantime I may add, that any notes on them, whether as charms or cures, would be most desirable. Inivri. Trada. Popular sayings. I would feel obliged, Mr. Editor, if you or any of your North of England readers would favor me direct, or otherwise through the medium of N&Q, with the origin and meaning of the following popular local sayings, peculiar to the North Country. Likewise permit me to observe, that if any of them can favor me, through either of the above channels, with a few more of the dark sayings of antiquity, either in the form of plain prose or rude rustic rhymes, peculiar to any or all of the 5 northern counties, to wit, York, Durham, Northumberland, Cumberland, and Westmoreland, they would not only be conferring an obligation upon myself, but likewise upon every one of your numerous readers who take pleasure in the fast-fading traditional relics of our ancestors. 1. As crafty as a Kendall fox. 2. Like the parson of Saddleworth, who could read in no book but his own. 3. Doncaster daggers. 4. The Woofle town o' Weatherby. 5. As sure as a louse in Pomfret. Pontefract. 6. Like the mayor of Hartlepool, you cannot do that. Company Durham. 7. Looks as vilt, worthless, as a pair of Yorkshire sleeves in a goldsmith's shop. 8. Hearts as trumps at Escott Hall, near Felton, Northumberland. 9. Silly good-natured, like a Hexham goose. 10. There are no rats at Hatfield, nor sparrows at Linham. Company Ebba. 11. A dent for a Galloway, a hind for an ass. Ibid. M. Ilaby Denham. M. Ilaby Denham. Piercebridge, Darlington, Durham. Minor queries. Hermit queries. 1. Some years ago a hermitage existed in certain grounds at Chelsea, the proprietor of which frequently advertised for a hermit, and I believe, never got one. Who was the proprietor of the said hermitage, and did he ever succeed in getting his toy tenanted? 2. In Gilbert White's poem, Invitation to Selborne, the following lines occur. Or where the hermit hangs the straw-clad cell, emerging gently from the leafy dell, by fancy planned, N.C. The only edition of the Letters which I possess is that by Sir William Jardine and Mr. Jesse, which affords a note on the passage, to the effect that the hermitage referred to was used by a young gentleman, who appeared occasionally in the character of a hermit. What was the name of the eccentric, and what is known of his hermit life? Is the hermitage still in existence? 3. Where is to be found the best account of anchorites, real and fictitious? Shirley Hibbard. Shirley Hibbard. Derivation of Cobb. What is the derivation of the word Cobb? There is but one harbour of that name in England, that of Lyme Regis. There was once another at Swanage. This was also styled, some 3 centuries ago, the Cobb or Connors. Query: what is the derivation of the family name? Cobham? G.R.L. Playbills? Will any of your correspondents inform me in what year playbills were first introduced, and at what period the year was added to the day of the month and week, which only is attached to the early bills? J.N.G.G. Sir Edward Grimes, Bart. A correspondent in a recent number of the Naval and Military Gazette asked who was Sir Edward Grimes, Bart, whose appointment appeared in the War Office Gazette of December 10, 1776, as surgeon's mate to the garrison at Minorca, when the baronetcy came into the family, when he died, and whether a gentleman of the same rank has ever, before or since that period, served in a similar situation in the English army? I have transferred these queries to the columns of N and Q, supposing that they might be answered by some of its correspondents. W. W. Malta. Smollett Strap. In N and Q, Volume 3, page 123, is an extract from the Examiner, March 26, 1809, relating to Hugh Hewson, who is there mentioned as being no less a personage than the identical Hugh Strap. Mr. Faulkner, in his History of Chelsea, Volume 1, page 171, states that Mr. W. Lewis, of Lombard Street, Chelsea, was the original of this character. He established himself in Chelsea by Smollett's advice, and died there about 1785. Faulkner states that he resided with his widow for 7 years, and thus having opportunities of being acquainted with the facts, I am inclined to give his account the preference. Now that these different accounts are brought forward, some reader of N and Q may be enabled with certainty to fix who was the identical H. G. D. The Iron Mask? Mr. James Cornish, Volume 5, page 474, says that, after half a century's active exertions, the Iron Mask was unveiled, and this sanguine person gives it also as his opinion that the author of Junius's letters will eventually be unearthed. The last event may perhaps happen, but what authority has he for asserting that the mysterious secret of the masked affair has ever been satisfactorily explained? Numerous, learned, and ingenious, as many of the hypotheses on the subject have been for upwards of a century, I have always imagined that an impenetrable veil of secrecy still continued to cover this wonderful historical mystery. Mr. James Cornish, A.S.A., was a rabid, Bland family. In the Carey pedigree in the Ducatus Leodiensis, it is stated that Sir Philip Carey of Hunslet, near Leeds, brother of the first Vist Falkland, married Elizabeth, daughter and heiress of rich Bland of Carlton, about AD 1600. Can any of your numerous readers inform me who this Mr. Bland was, whom he married, and which Carlton is meant? A.D. I have searched the Yorkshire Visitations at the Museum, and consulted Nitch Carlyle's History of the Bland family, with no result. Possibly Mr. Hunter, who is so deeply versed in Yorkshire matters, might throw some light on the subject. Mr. Hunter. G. E. Adams. G. E. Adams. Oxford and Cambridge Club. Thomas Watson, Bishop of St. David's, 1687–99, and c. No notice of the period or place of his death has yet appeared, nor of the age of Bishop Turner of Calcutta, 1829–31, as also that of Bishop Gaba. Regarding the latter prelate, as he is styled D.D. in the ecclesiastical almanacs and directories, I am anxious to learn whether that degree was conferred upon him by any English university on his consecration in 1846. A.S.A. was a rabid crescent. The article under this head in the Encyclopaedia Metropolitana asserts that the crescent was first adopted by the Ottomans as a symbol after the taking of Constantinople in 1446. If so, the device must have been unknown to the Saracens at the time of the Crusades. Can any of your readers inform me whether this statement is correct? Fickleness. fickleness. Quod feudaci. I should be glad to know the sense of the following epitaph, copied at Lavenham Church, Norfolk, many years since. It has long lain in my notebook, waiting for such a publication as N and Q, through which to inquire its meaning. John Wells, OB 1694. John Wells. Quod feudaci, quod est. Quod non feudaci, quod esse. Esse quod non esse. Quod est, non est erit esse. A. B. R. Belmont. Coming home to men's business. Where does the phrase, coming home to men's business and bosoms, first occur? I find it said of Bacon's Essays in Baconiana, first edit. 1679? J. P. Birmingham. Thomas Gibbes of Fenton. Can any of your genealogical readers tell me what other issue, if any, there was of the marriage of Thomas Gibbes of Fenton, in the parish of Dartington, in the county of Devon, and daughter of Sir William Courtenay of Powderham, besides their son William Gibbes, who died in London A.D. 1570? A.D. Also whether John Gibbes of Fenton, father of the above-named Thomas Gibbes, who married the heiress of William May or May, had any other issue? Henry H. Gibbs. Henry H. Gibbs. Frognall, Hampstead. The Whipping Toms, at Leicester. A singular annual custom, under the above designation, formerly prevailed in this town, from time immemorial, on Shrove Tuesday. It is unnecessary to take up your valuable space with a detailed account of it, as it is fully described in Throsby's History of Leicester, page 356, and in Hone's Yearbook, page 538. My object is to inquire if any custom at all analogous to it is known to have existed elsewhere, and if so, what is the supposed origin of it? Nothing whatever is known of the origin of the custom in this town, beyond a vague popular tradition that it was instituted, like several other curious customs, by John of Gaunt, during his lengthened residence in the castle within what was then termed the New Works, of which, now called the Newark, the gathering was held. However venerable from its antiquity, it was, like too many of the sports of the Middle Ages, a custom more honored in the breach than the observance, and, as such, was put down in the year 1847 by a local Act of Parliament, not, however, without a serious affray between the police and the people. Leicesteriensis. Leicesteriensis. The Trial of Our Lord. I have lately seen an old picture of the trial of our Lord before Pilate, who sits in the midst of the Jewish Sanhedrim, each member of which has a scroll over his head, giving his name and the sentence he is said to have uttered on that occasion. I have been told there is a large coarse engraving of this picture sometimes to be found in cottages, but I have not been able to procure one. The names and sentiments are of course fictitious. Is anything known of their origin? P. Olney. Can any correspondent state what is the signification of this name? The ancient spelling is Olney or Olney, not Olney, as it has sometimes been spelled of late years. The difficulty is not as to the termination ey, but as to the first syllable. The parish church, which stands at the southern extremity of the town, on the banks of the Ouse, is entirely, modern alterations excepted, of the 14th century. There is not a trace of any earlier work. Tradition says that the church was formerly at the other, or northern end of the town, where there is a place which is, as I am informed, described in the deeds of some of the adjoining premises as the old churchyard, though it has been desecrated time out of mind. Closely adjacent is a clear spring, still called Cryston Well, and also the trunk of a very ancient elm. Human bones are stated to have been occasionally dug up within the enclosure. There is a vague tradition that the town as well as the church has been removed southward, i.e. nearer the river. Readers of N and Q, who can supply any information respecting the removal of the church and town, or any other particulars, in addition to those contained in Dr. Lipscomb's History of Bucks, concerning the parish of Olney, including the hamlet and manor of Warrington, and the now district parish of Weston Underwood, will greatly oblige. W. P. Storer. W. P. Storer. Olney Bucks. Album. What was the origin, and where do we find the earliest notice of the kind of friendly memorial book so well known among us as an album? Was it not first used by the learned men of Germany as a repository for the complimentary tributes of their foreign visitors? Is there any mention of it in any English author earlier than Isaac Walton, who tells us that Sir Henry Wotton, when ambassador at Venice, wrote in the album of Christopher Fleckemore a Latin sentence to the effect that an ambassador is an honest man, sent to lie abroad for the good of his country? Where is the earliest specimen of an English album, according to the modern form and use of the scrapbook so called? D. The Lisle family? Can any of the readers of N and Q give me some fuller information than is to be found in Littleton's History of England, or refer me to any authorities for such, concerning the family and connections of the following personages? There was a Lady Lisle, who, Temp. Jack. 2. Was tried at Winchester by the notorious Judge Jeffreys, and afterwards executed, for harboring 2 rebels after the Battle of Sedgemoor. I believe she was beheaded as a favor, instead of being burnt. She was the widow of one of the judges who consented to the death of that ill-fated monarch Charles I. I observe the barony of Lisle has been extinct, or in abeyance, on 4 or 5 different occasions, was either about this time? The present peerage appears to have been created circa 1758. Are these descendants of that family? I possess portraits of Lord and Lady Lisle, size 6 feet by 4, and much wish to learn the above, together with any other particulars relating to the family. John Garland. John Garland. Dorchester. Wards of the Crown. I find the origin of this ancient prerogative of royalty thus quaintly explained at page 132. Of King's Vale Royal of England, 1656. Hugh Lupus, first Norman Earl of Chester, and nephew of the Conqueror, at his death in 1101, left his son Richard, then an infant of 7 years of age, intituled then to his earldom of Chester, and married to Matilda, daughter to Stephen, Earl of Blois. And this Matilda was niece to King Henry I, by reason whereof the said king took into his tuition and custody the said young earl, from whence, they say, this of a custom grew to be a law, that young heirs in their nonage became pupils, or wards, unto the king. A very tender care had this king over this princely child, and brought him up in the company of his own children, with whom he sent him into Normandy, and with them there provided the most princely and best education for them. Thereafter history is well known. Having duly arrived at man's estate, these promising young princes and their companion, Richard, the royal ward, were sent for from Normandy by the affectionate king, whence, taking ship at Harfleur, they set sail for England, but through some mismanagement, the vessel striking upon a rock, the entire company perished except one butcher, who, by the help of a mast, swam safe to land. This tragedy happened about December 7th, 1120. I believe this to be the first instance recorded in English history of a ward to the king, but shall be happy to receive correction from any better informed correspondent of N and Q. T. Hughes. T. Hughes. Chester. Tate, an artist. A friend of mine has a very fine family portrait, very much admired by judges, and generally ascribed to Reynolds, whose style it greatly resembles. But I believe it has with some confidence been stated to be the work of a pupil of Sir Joshua's, named Tate. The picture is about 70 years old. Would you, or any of your readers, kindly inform me whether an artist of that name lived at that time, and whether he was a pupil of Sir Joshua Reynolds? A. W. Kilburn. Philip d'Auvergne. On the 12th of March, 1792, the King of Great Britain granted to Captain Philip d'Auvergne R.N. his license to accept the succession to the said duchy, Bouillon, in case of the death of the hereditary prince, only son of the reigning duke, without issue male, pursuant to a declaration of His Serene Highness, dated June 25, 1791, at the desire, and with the express and formal consent of the nation. I find this in Brooke's Gazetteer, under the heading of Bouillon. Can any of your correspondents give a further account of Captain d'Auvergne? I suppose the troubles consequent upon the French Revolution would prevent his accession to the duchy, even if he survived the hereditary prince? E. H. A. Somersetshire Ballad. I have a note of the following verse of an old ballad. Where can I find the remaining verses? Go ask the vicar of Taunton Dean, and he'll tell you the banns were asked it. and a good fat saupon he had for his pains, and he's carried it home in his basket. SAS. Lady High Sheriff. Can any of your Herefordshire readers inform me who the lady was who served the office of High Sheriff for that county, somewhere about the years 1769 or 1770? Her husband had been appointed, but dying shortly afterwards, his widow took his place, and attended the judges with the javelin men, dressed in deep mourning. If any one could give me any information about this lady, I should be much obliged. I should be glad to know whether there is another instance of a Lady High Sheriff on record? W.M. Major General Lambert, the first president of Cromwell's council, after the Restoration was exiled to Guernsey, where he remained for 30 years a prisoner. Noble, in his House of Cromwell, Volume 1, page 369, says Mrs. Lambert has been supposed to have been partial to the Protector. That her name was Fra, an elegant and accomplished woman. She had a daughter, married to a Welsh judge, whom she survived, and died in January, 1736-7. Any of your correspondents who may be able, will oblige by informing me who Mrs. Lambert was, when she and the General died, and to whom the daughter was married. Noble evidently had not been able to ascertain who the accomplished woman was. G. Hoyle, meaning of, and Hoyle family. What is the English to the Celtic word Hoyle, and was there any family of the name of Hoyle previous to the year 1600? If so, can you give me any history of them, or say where same may be found? Also, what is the arms, crest, and motto of that family? F.K. Robert Dodsley. In all the biographies, this amiable and worthy man is said to have been born at Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. Does he anywhere state this himself? If not, what is the evidence in favor of such statement? Not the parish register of Mansfield, certainly. I have often thought that a life of Dodsley in extenso might be made an interesting vehicle for illustrating the progress of an individual from the humble rank of a livery servant to the influential position of a first-class London bookseller in the Augustan age of English literature, including, of course, all the reflex influences of the society of that period. There is plenty of matter, and I think a well-known correspondent of N&Q and Gents Mag, whose initials are P.C., would know where to find and how to use it. N.D. Mary Queen of Scots. In the Gentleman's Magazine, Volume 99, Part 2, page 77, it is stated that the late Earl of Buchan, who died in April, 1829, in some letters warmly embraced the cause of Mary Queen of Scots against Dr. Robertson. But we are not informed whether they were ever printed, or where they are to be found. As I have always felt a strong conviction of the injustice done this unfortunate woman, I shall be gratified by any communication stating where these letters can be met with. F.R.A. Heuristisch, Evristic. The word heuristic occurs 4 times in the Kritik der reinen Vernunft, pages 480, 515, 520, 568, edition Leipzig, 1838. I cannot find it in any German dictionary. Mr. Haywood, edition 1838, translates it Evristic, which I cannot find in any English dictionary. I conjecture that it may be Upsilon Rho Sigma Kappa Omega Germanist, and that it will bear the translation tentative. Will someone, better versed than myself in the language of German metaphysics, tell me whether I am right, and if not, set me so? Upsilon Rho Sigma Kappa Omega. H.B.C. U. Club. Minor queries with answers. Eugenia. By Hayes and Carr. Can any of your readers give me any account of the following play, as to where the scene of it is laid, and c. Eugenia, a Tragedy, by Samuel Hayes and Robert Carr, 8 Vo. 1766. This play, which appears to have never been acted, was written by the Rev. Samuel Hayes, author of several of the Seatonian Prize poems, and who was at one time usher in Westminster School. Robert Carr, who assisted him in writing it, appears to have been one of the Westminster scholars about 1766, but I am unable to give any further account of him. A.Z. Glasgow. The scene, as stated at the commencement of the play, was laid in and near the Mercian camp, on the confines of Wales, except the first act, and beginning of the third, which lies in the British camp, distant from the Mercian 8 miles. The dramatis personae were Britons, Cadwalain, king of the Britons, Ormenus, a noble captive, Albanact, Eliud, Edgar, officers, Eugenia, Althira, captives. Mercians, Penda, king of Mercia, Ethelred, his son, Osmond, nephew to the king, Offa, Egbert, Edwin, officers. British and Mercian officers, prisoners, guards, and other attendants. Claret. How or from whence have we adopted the word claret, as applied to the wines of the Bordeaux district, and which seems to be utterly unknown in other parts of Europe? Vinos. Vinos. Dr. Pegg, in his Anonymiana, Cent. 3. Sect. 57 says, "There is a place of the name of claret in the Duc de Rohan's Memoirs, lib. 4, from whence I conceive the French wine takes its name. It is stated in the Memoirs as being 5 miles from Montpellier. Strike, but hear me. On what occasion, and by whom, were these words first used? I have not been able to trace them. Abba. Abba. These words occur in a conversation between Eurybiades and Themistocles, and will be found in Plutarch's Life of Themistocles, cap. 11. Fever at Croydon. In Camden's Britannia before me, with date on, written, title page 1610, Londini, Georgiard Bishop, Jonas Norton, page 320, under Counties Thray, and against the marginal. Croydon. It is thus stated. As for that sudden swelling water or bourne, which the common people reports to break forth here out of the ground, presaging, I wot not how, either dearth of corn or the pestilence, may see me not worthy once the naming, and yet the Uentes sometime ensuing hath procured it credit. I have heard it stated, without reference to the above, that the aforesaid stream had risen during the last few months, and if such be the case, the fever that has been so prevalent in the town seems to bear out the above statement. Can any of your correspondents inform me whether the above fact is mentioned in any other account of the place, and if so, where? R.W. H. It appears that our early ballad writers do not give a very favorable account of the locality of Croydon. Listen to Patrick Hannay, Gent, in 1662. It seems of starved sterility the seat, where barren downs do it environ round, whose parched tops in summer are not wet, and only are with snow and winter crowned. Only with bareness they do still abound, or if on some of them we roughness find, it's tawny heath, badge of the barren rind. In midst of these stands Croydon clothed in black. Croydon, in a low bottom sink of all these hills, and is recede of all the dirty wrack, which from their tops still in abundance trills. The unpaved lanes with muddy mire it fills. If one shower fall, or, if that blessing stay, you may well smell, but never see your way. Jesmas et dismas. What is the meaning of two terms, jesmas and dismas, in the following couplet, which I transcribed from MS. Entries in an old and rare volume lately bought, of date 1564, and the handwriting would seem coeval with the printing of the book. The lines evidently relate to the crucifixion of our Lord between the thieves, but I have never seen any appellations given to these last, and cannot fix a meaning for the terms with any certainty. They may have reference to the penitence of one, and the hardened state of the other still tied and bound in the chain of his sins, but I know not to what language to refer them. Disparibus meritus pendit tria corpora lignis. Jesmas et dismas, metus divina potestas. A.B.R. Our correspondent is right in supposing that jesmas and dismas are the names traditionally assigned to the two malefactors, and which occur in the old mysteries, and c. Dismas is that of the penitent thief. These names are, we believe, mentioned in the pseudo-gospel of Nicodemus, and some particulars of the legend, we believe, but we cannot just now ascertain, are preserved in Molin. De Pictor. Sacris 1, 4. C. 9. Satirical Medal. 1. I shall be glad to obtain some information respecting a curious medal in my possession bearing Obv. Ecclesia perversa tenet facium diaboli, 666. A face in profile, crowned with the tiara, turned round, the same face becomes that of the devil. Rev. Sapiens stulti aliquando. a head with a cardinal's cap, which reversed becomes a face surmounted with a fool's cap and bells. The metal is of silver, nearly the size of a crown piece, and from the form of the letters is, I suppose, about 200 years old. John I. Dredge. John I. Dredge. This curious metal, which is figured in Rigolot's Monets de Faux, pl. 4. Figure 10, and the reverse of which has been engraved by Tilliat, Fête de Faux, as the seal of the Mare Fall of Dijon, is a satirical medal issued by the Protestants. Their opponents retorted or provoked its issue by one which Rigolot has also figured, figure 11, which has on one side the head of Calvin, crowned with the tiara, and c, which, when turned, becomes that of the devil, and the words Joan, Calvinus Heresiarch, Pessimus, and on the reverse a cardinal's head, which is turned into a fool's head, with the motto Et stulti aliquando sapite. Psalm 93. Replies. The Gookins of Ireland. Volume 1, pages 385. 473, 492, Volume 2, page 44, Volume 4, page 103. Upon an examination of the ancient records which are preserved in the Exchequer Record Office, at the Four Courts, Dublin, it will be found that in the year 1632 Sir Vincent Gookin acquired by purchase from David Earl of Barrymore the lands of Cargane in the county of Cork, and from Mr. William Fitzjohn O'Hee, in the year 1633, the lands of Ballamaquilliam and Crury, in the same county, and that he died on the 7th of February 1637, that Captain Robert Gookin, in recompense for his services as a soldier and adventurer, obtained an assignment from the protector of an estate in the same county, consisting of upwards of 5,000 acres, which he afterwards surrendered to Charles II, and that thereupon the king granted it to Roger Earl of Orrery, that Vincent Gookin died on the 29th of March, 1692, and that his son Robert, and Dorothy Clayton, were his executors, that in the year 1681 the collectors of quit rent made a demand upon Thomas Gookin, one of Sir Vincent's sons, for the rent of the lands which his father had purchased from Mr. O'Hee, and that, upon proof being made to the Court of Exchequer by Mr. John Burroughs, one of Sir Vincent's executors, that the estate was a Protestant interest, or, in other words, that as the family had been of the Protestant religion, and not implicated in the rebellion of 1641, the lands were therefore not liable to the payment of quit rent, they were accordingly put out of charge. It appears also by the records which are deposited in the same office, that Thomas Gookin, gentleman, was indicted at the sessions held at Bandon in the year 1671. For that he, with several others, riotously and unlawfully did assemble and associate themselves together at Leigh on the 27th of December 1671, and in and upon David Barry and Charles Carthy, gentlemen, did make a cruel assault and affray, and did beat, wound, and falsely imprison them, under colour of a warrant from Henry Bathurst Esq., made and interlined by the said Thomas Gookin, and that Elizabeth Gookin, of Leigh spinster, was one of his sureties. This Elizabeth was probably descended from a Charles Gookin, who claimed the lands of Leigh in the time of the Protector. By the records in the same department, it appears that in and previous to the year 1719 a suit was pending in the Court of Exchequer with respect to the lands of Court Machry, and by the receiver's account, which bears the autograph of Robert Gookin, it is shown that a payment was made to Mrs. Dorothy Gookin for maintenance, and that there was an arrear due to Lady Mary Irwin at ye time of Captain Gookin's death, which happened in September 1709. And in the same office there is deposited a deed, dated the 30th of October 1729, which relates to the lands of Cloncaff, in the same county of Cork, whereto John Allen, an alderman of the city of Cork, and Elizabeth Gookin, otherwise Togood, his wife, and Robert Gookin, Esq., eldest son and devisee of Robert Gookin deceased, are parties. I have been informed that a lengthened account of Sir Vincent Gookin is to be found in Lord Stafford's State Letters, that much information may be gathered from the Privy Council papers Tempori Cromwell, which are deposited in Dublin Castle, with respect to Captain Robert Gookin, and that in the year 1620 Daniel Gookin was one of the undertakers in the county of Longford, and that his estate of 500 acres afterwards passed to an ancestor of the late popular novelist Miss Edgeworth. J.F.F. Dublin. Return. Amongst the inquisitions of the County of Cork which are preserved in the Rolls Office of Chancery, there is one which relates to Vincent Gookin, and was taken at Mallow, on the 14th of August 1638, and is probably an inquisition post-mortem. Stabat Quocunque Gesseris. Volume 7, page 65. This little query may perhaps come under the category you mention in the address of your opening number for the year, although it might be a sufficient reply merely to say that it was the legend round the common Manx halfpenny, encircling the three legs of man on its reverse. But when we consider these three conjoined limbs in their awkward and impossible position, the propriety of the legend may be doubted, and its presence attributable only to the numismatic necessity of accompanying the figure with its motto. The following epigram has been composed by some Manxmen thoroughly convinced of the propriety of the application. Reader! Thou'st seen a falling cat, light always on his feet so pat. A shuttlecock will still descend, meeting the ground with nether end. The persevering Manxman thus, a shuttlecock or pauvre puss, however through the world he's tossed, however disappointed cross, reverses, losses, fortune's frown, no chance or change can keep him down. Upset him any way you will, upon his legs you'll find him still, forever active, brisk, and spunky. Stabat Gesseris Quocunque. Where, however, we perceive in the last line the rhyme has destroyed the meter of the Latin poet, if the words be really a classical quotation, which I should wish to form into a query for some of your readers. But the emblem, as the famous triquetra, is one of the most ancient and celebrated of antiquity. It figures on the oldest coins of Metapontum, and subsequently on many of those of Sicily, particularly on those of Palermo and Syracuse, as island cities, for to islands, from one use of its name in the Greek word kaitlamdata, as a jetting promontory, a breakwater, or a jetty, was it more especially appropriated. Hence it is even now borne in the Neapolitan blazon for Sicily, as Britain, if she followed the continental examples, would be entitled to quarter it in her full imperial escutcheon, not only for Man, but for Malta, by which latter it was early taken as the device. But under this distinctive name as Cheel, it only figured the potency which all pointed or angular forms and substances possessed insensitively or in a triple degree. To understand this, we should consider the force that all pointed or sharp instruments possess. The awl, the wedge, the adze, are well known for their assistance to the mechanic, and the transference of the idea to non-physical aid was so easy, and so consonant to the human mind, that, when we speak of the acuteness of an intellect, the point of an epigram, the keen edge of a sarcasm, we are scarcely conscious that we indulge at all in the maze of metaphor. Kaitalamdata. Nor was the adaptation of the figure less suitable to the purposes of superstition, by which it was seized on, both for the purpose of driving away the evil one or forcing him to appear. All edged tools, or angular forms, gave complete mastery over him. Therefore, the best method of obtaining sight of the otherwise invisible spirits of the air is by putting the head beneath the legs, the human fork or angle, the true Greek cheel, as it is also used by Saxo Grammaticus in a dialogue between Birko and Ruda, to see Odin riding on the whirlwind. Birko. At nunc alubis sit cavolgo disider Athen. Armipotens, uno semper contentus ocello. Dic mihi Ruda, precer, usquam si conspicis illum? Ruta. Ad oculum proprius et nostris pro spice celis. Anti sacerturis victrisi lumina signo. Assi vis presentum tutto cognoscere martem. Birko. Sic potero horrendum frigi specter maridum. And see. So boys in the north put their heads between their legs to see the devil looking over Lincoln, and I am indebted to a mention of my Shakespeare's Puck and his folklore in the Maidstone Journal for the proof that this belief still exists in Ireland from an anecdote told by Curran, who, in the absence of a werewolf on which to try its efficacy, would prove it on a large mastiff by walking backwards to it in this posture, while the animal made such a grip at the poor barrister's hinder region, that Curran was unable to sit with any gratification to himself for some weeks afterwards. Permit me to refer such readers as are curious to know more on this subject, to the above work, page 73. But if you still can find room for a continental proof of the efficacy of a pair of shears as very powerful Cheel, not only for driving away Satan, but altogether banishing him from earth, allow me to adduce from a most excellent collection of tales, Traditions of the Bavarian Territories, Sagenbuch der Bayerischen Land, just published by Herr A. Schopner, under the auspices of the ex-king, the following tale. Number 757. Die Skarfskier, the Sharp Scissors. Outside the parish church of Munnerstadt, you see a gravestone with a pair of shears sculptured on it. He who rests under it was a pious tailor, who was often disturbed by the devil in his devotions. The latter appeared to him frequently, and whispered him to throw plenty of cabbage into his hell, a technical German term for its receptacle, I know not if usual amongst the English gentle craft, and otherwise played him many insidious pranks. Our tired Schneider complained of the evil to a pious hermit, who advised him, the next time the Prince of Darkness made his appearance, to take the shears and cut off his tail. The tailor resolved to follow his advice, and on the next visitation, he lopped the tail clean from his body. The devil holloed out murder, went off, and ever afterwards left the tailor in peace. But the shears remained a long time as an heirloom in the family, and their form was sculptured on his tombstone in remembrance. Since then, the devil walks through Munnerstadt without a posterior adornment, and therefore not now recognizable, which is the reason that many people assert that there is no longer any devil. Well might Herrick, in his Hesperides, inculcate. Hang up hooks and shears to scare. Hence the hag that rides the mare. William Bell, Phil. Doc. William Bell. 17, Gower Place. Picnics. Volume 4, page 152, Volume 6, pages 518, and c. Will you accept a French elucidation of the etymon of this word, which has sorely puzzled your correspondents? What saith the Encyclopédie de gens du monde, Tom? 19, 1843. Pique-nique. Expression empruntée de l'anglais, OLS formée de pique, choicer, et nique, instant précis, et signifie choix judiciaire au tout essai rencontre bien. On essai cert aussi en français de cette locution pour designer un repas au chacun paie son équite, ou bien auquel chacun contribue en fournissant un de plats. Pique-nique. The word is in Ménage, Dictionnaire étymologique, folio, 1694. Pique-nique. Nous dysons faire un repas à pique-nique, pour dire faire un repas au chacun paie son équite, si que les flamands dissent, part beetle, chacun essaie part. Si mot n'est pas ancien dans notre langue, et il est inconnu dans la plupart de nos provinces. Pique-nique. Picnics were known and practiced in the reign of James I. An amusing description of one is given in a letter from Sir Philip Mainwaring, dated Nov. 22, 1618. The knight is writing to Lord Arundel from Newmarket. The prince's birthday hath been solemnized here by those few marquises and lords which found themselves here, and to supply the want of the lords, knights and squires were admitted to a consultation, wherein it was resolved that such a number should meet at Gamages, and bring every man his dish of meat. It was left to their own choices what to bring. Some strove to be substantial, some curios, and some extravagant. Sir George Goring's invention bore away the bell, and that was 4 huge brawny pigs, piping hot, bid and harnessed with ropes of sausages, all tied to a monstrous bag pudding. And on the 28th of the same month, Mr. Chamberlain wrote to Sir Dudley Carleton, We hear nothing from Newmarket, but that they devise all the means they can to make themselves merry. As of late there was a feast appointed at a farmhouse not far off, whither every man should bring his dish. The king brought a great chine of beef, the Marquis of Hamilton 4 pigs encircled with sausages, the Earl of Southampton 2 turkeys, another 6 partridges, and one a whole tray full of buttered eggs, and so all passed off very pleasantly. Nichols's Progresses of James I, Volume 3, pages 495, 496. W. M. R. E. Mr. Arthur Wilson has written to us that this word is Swedish, and to be found in Widegren's Swedish and English Dictionary. We may add that it is also in Delen's, but we do not believe it to be of Swedish origin. We believe it will eventually be traced to a French source. Edition. Mr. Arthur Wilson. Ed. Koninger, or Koningry. Volume 7, page 182. The Latin word for a rabbit is cuniculus, as is shown in the following couplet of Martial. Gaudet in ephasis habitera cuniculus antris. Monstravit tucidas hostibus alvias. 1360. The rabbit appears to have been originally peculiar to Spain, southern France, and the adjoining islands. Strabo 3. 2. Section 6 says that it is found nearly over the whole of Spain, and in the Balearic Islands, and that it reaches as far as Massilia. Polybius 12. 3. Likewise states it to be a native of Corsica. It was unknown to the Greeks, and is not mentioned by Aristotle in his works on natural history. See Camus, Notes, sur l'histoire de animaux d'Aristote, page 278. Nor does it ever occur in the Aesopian fables, although the hare is frequently introduced. Hence it had no native Greek name, and Polybius borrows the Latin word, calling it Kapaniod Kapalamdamikron, compare Athen. 9. Page 400. Strabo uses the periphrasis of burrowing hares, gam epsilon o upsilon chiomicron iota lambda alpha gam iota delta epsilon. Aelian, again, employs the Latin name, which he considers to be of Iberian origin, de nat. Anim. 13. 15. If this be true, the sense of subterranean passage, which cuniculus also bears, is secondary, and not primary, compare Plin. Nat. Hist. 8. 81. Kapanuiod kapalamdamicron. Gam epsilon o upsilon chiomicron iota lambda alpha gam iota delta epsilon. The language of Vero de Re Rust. 3. 12. Likewise shows that the rabbit was in his time peculiar to Spain, and had not been introduced into Italy. The meaning of the Hebrew word sapon, which is translated coney in the authorized version of the Old Testament, Lev. 11. 5. Deuteronomy 14. 7. PS Civ 18, PROV XXX. 26. Has been fully investigated by biblical critics and naturalists. See Bochitz Hierozoican, Volume 2. Pages 409 to 429. Edition Rosemuller. Weiner, Bibl Rio Wörterbuch, in Springhace. Penny Cyclopedia, in Hyrax. It is certainly not the rabbit, which is not a native of Syria and Palestine, but whether this ruminant quadruped, which lives in the rocks, is the jerboa, or a species of hyrax, or some other small edible animal of a like description, is difficult to determine. Springhace. Hyrax. From the manner in which Strabo speaks of Spain and the Balearic Islands being infested by large numbers of rabbits, it would appear, as Legrand d'Aussy remarks, Vie privée de Francais, Tom. 2, page 24, that the ancients did not eat its flesh. The rabbit is now so abundant in parts of the south of France, that, according to the same author, a sportsman in the islands near Alls who did not kill 100 would be dissatisfied with his day's sport. A Provençal gentleman, who in 1551 went out to kill rabbits with some of his vassals, and 3 dogs, brought home in the evening not less than 600. From the Latin cuniculus have been formed, according to the proper analogy, the Italian coniglio, the Spanish conejo, and the French conille, sometimes modified into conin. See Diaz, Roman. Graham, Volume 2. Page 264. From the Old French conin was borrowed the English coning or konig, afterwards shortened into coney, and from this word have been formed coniger and coningry or conigry, for rabbit warren, see Hallowell's Dict. In conig. Conillus, for a rabbit warren, occurs in Ducange. Conjar is the Spanish term. Konig. The Germans, like the English, had no native name for the rabbit, an animal not indigenous in their country. Hence they borrowed the French name conin, which they altered into Canaan, and have since formed the diminutive Canincian. In Swabian, the form used is Kuniglein. See Adelung in V. The Dutch word is Kanin. The rabbit was probably introduced into England from France. Query: when did that introduction take place? Also, when did the later term, rabbit, supersede the old name coney? And what is the etymology of rabbit? The French lapin, which has supplanted the old word conin, is said to be formed from lepinus, an adjective of lepus. L. Your solution of the etymology of this word, as coming from coney burrow, is no doubt correct, but I apprehend the last syllable has a more specific derivation. On the opposite sides of the Loch of Belfast, there are two localities in which this Old English word is preserved. This district was, as you are aware, colonized by English settlers about 1590 AD, when large grants were made to Sir Arthur Chichester, ancestor of the present Marquis of Donegal. At Carrickfergus, on the north side of the bay, there is a spot called the Conyberry, which is a corruption of Coneyburrow. But on the opposite side, at Holy Ward, there is a populous rabbit warren, known as the Kinniger, which I take to be the Conninger or Coningeria about which your correspondent asks. Burrow. A.D. J. Emerson Tennant. J. Emerson Tennant. Names and Numbers of British Regiments. Volume 7, page 155. CS third application relative to the names and numbers of regiments has roused me into activity, and I now forward you the required information, viz. Query 1. What was the origin of giving British regiments the name of certain officers, instead of numbering them as at present? Regiments were numbered, but it was generally customary to designate them by the name of their colonel previous to 1751. 2. If in honor of an officer commanding the corps, was the name changed when that officer died or removed to another regiment, or what was the rule? The name of the regiment changed by death or removal of the colonel. 3. When did the present mode of numbering regiments begin, and by whom was it introduced? July 1, 1751, by royal warrant of George II, when the number of the regiment was directed to be embroidered on its standard. Even after the numbering became general, the names of colonels were for some time retained. 4. What was the rule or principle laid down in giving any regiment a certain number? Was it according to the length of time it had been embodied? In 1694 a board of officers assembled to decide the relative rank of regiments, and the regiments formed in England were placed by seniority of raising, but those from Scotland or Ireland on their being placed upon the English establishment. 5. What is the guide now in identifying a named with a numbered regiment? For example, at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, Wolfe's, Barrett's, and Howard's Foot were engaged. Now, what is the rule for ascertaining the numbers of these and other old regiments in the British Army at the present day? The Army List with colonels of that date. In 1746 Wolfe's was the 8th Foot, Barrett's the 4th Foot, and Howard's the 3rd Foot. There were two Howards of the same date, 1746, Green and the Buff Howards, known by their facings. Arthur Hamilton. Arthur Hamilton. P.S. I shall be happy to give further information and more details if required, and enclose my card to the editor. Vickers Apostolic in England. Volume 6, pages 125, 297, 400. I send the following as some answer to the inquiries made by your correspondent A. For the more ample account of Bishop Ellis, I am indebted to an article in the Rambler, Volume 7. Page 313, entitled Collections Illustrating the History of the English Benedictine Congregation. Richard Smith, appointed Bishop of Chalcis, February 4, 1625, and Vicar Apostolic of England. He withdrew to France 4 years afterwards, and died in Paris in 1655, aged 88, in a house belonging to the English convent upon the Fosse St. Victor. He was probably buried in the convent chapel, where a monument to his memory was erected. See the Rev. Joseph Barrington's Memoirs of Ponzani, page 109. John Laban, consecrated Bishop of Adramyttum, and appointed Vicar Apostolic of England, 1685, on the country being divided into 4 vicariates in 1688, he was appointed to the London, or Southern District. On the breaking out of the Revolution in the same year, he was committed to the Tower, but his peaceable and inoffensive conduct soon caused him to be discharged, and he was suffered to remain unmolested until his death, which occurred in 1703. He was greatly beloved and respected by his flock. Bonaventure Giffard, of the ancient Roman Catholic family of the Giffords of Chillington, Staffordshire, appointed Vicar Apostolic of the Midland District, 1688. Like Bishop Laban, on the breaking out of the Revolution, he was committed to the Tower, but was soon released, and on the condition of always making the place of his abode known to the government, he passed the remainder of his days unmolested. On the death of Bishop Laban in 1703, he was removed to the London, or Southern District, where he died March 12, 1734, aged 90. There is a good portrait of Bishop Gifford at the Roman Catholic College of Old Hall Green in Hertfordshire. Philip Ellis, third son of Rev. John Ellis, rector of Wadsden, Bucks, by his wife Susanna Welbore, whilst a pupil in Westminster School, was called to the Catholic faith, and to the grace of religion, in St. Gregory's Convent, Douay, where he made his profession, November 30, 1670 18. After duly qualifying himself for the ministry, he was sent to labor in the English vineyard. His great abilities recommended him to the notice of King James II, who appointed him one of his chaplains and preachers, and when Innocent XI, on January 30, 1688, signified his wish that His Majesty would nominate 3 fit subjects to fill the newly constituted vicariates, Midland, Northern, and Western, for Dr. John Laban, Bishop of Adramyttam. During the last 3 years had governed the whole of England, Father Ellis, then 36 years of age, was selected for the Western Vicariate, and was consecrated bishop on Sunday, May 6, 1688, at St. James's, where the king had established a convent of 14 Benedictine monks, by the title of Aureliopolis. In the second week of July, the new prelate confirmed a considerable number of youths, some of them recent converts, in the new chapel of the Savoy. Ellis Correspondence, Volume 2, page 62. In his letter, ibid page 145, to his brother John, dated from St. James's, August 26, 1688, he describes the uneasiness of the court at the preparations making in Holland by the Prince of Orange. We doubt if this Vicar Apostolic attempted to visit his diocese, for, on the breaking out of the Revolution at London in the ensuing November, he was apprehended and committed to Newgate. Macaulay's History, Volume 2, page 563, yet he was soon restored to liberty. Foreseeing but faint hope of serving the cause of religion in such turbulent times, he left England for the court of his exiled sovereign at St. Germain's, and, after staying some time, obtained permission to visit the Eternal City. In 1693 Pope Innocent XII made him an assistant prelate, and on the feast of St. Louis, 6 years later, he sung the High Mass at Rome, in the French church, before many cardinals, invited and received by the Cardinal de Bouillon. The Prince of Monaco, ambassador of France, being then incognito, assisted in a tribune. Resigning his Western Vicariate, he was promoted by Pope Clement XI to the vacancy of Segni, in the Campagna di Roma. There he originated a seminary, over which he watched with parental zeal and solicitude. In November 1710, he held a synod in the choir of his cathedral. About 70 of his clergy attended, all of whom he entertained with generous hospitality. In addition to his many meritorious works, he substantially repaired and embellished his palace, and to his cathedral he left a splendid mitre and some costly vestments, but the bulk of his property he bequeathed to his seminary. A dropsy of the chest carried him off on the November 16, 1726, AET 74, and his remains were interred in the center of the seminary church. 7 sermons of this prelate, preached before James II, at Windsor and St. James's, were printed. A beautiful portrait of the bishop, engraved by Meyer, is prefixed to the Ellis Correspondence, published by the late Lord Dover, in 2 volumes 8 vo. 1829. James Smith was consecrated Bishop of Calliopolis, and appointed Vicar Apostolic of the Northern District, 1688. He died May 20, 1711. The following Vicars Apostolic were nominated after the above 4 till the year 1750. Midland District. George Witham, of the ancient Roman Catholic family of the Withams of Cliffe, in the North Riding of Yorkshire, was educated at Douay College, consecrated Bishop of Marcopolis, and appointed Vicar Apostolic of the Midland District in 1703. He was removed to the Northern District in 1716, and died in 1725, at Cliff Hall, the seat of his family. Western District. Matthew Pritchard, a Franciscan friar, Bishop of Miranin. I have not been able to ascertain the date either of his consecration or death. The latter took place at Perthshire, Monmouthshire. Northern District. Thomas Williams, a Dominican friar, Bishop of Tiberiopolis, died at Huddlestone, Yorkshire, April 14, 1740. J. F. W. Return. I have since learned Bishop Pritchard was consecrated in 1715. The reply of E. H. A. to my query about these vicars apostolic is rather unsatisfactory. I admit his correction of Chalcedon for Chalcis, but wish that he had been more explicit in his notices of both those vicars apostolic appointed in 1685–88, as well as of those since nominated. When did Smith and Ellis die? And what was the see in Italy to which the latter was nominated? Who were the consecrators of Gifford, Ellis, and Smith? Bishop Laban was, I think, one, and is said to have been assisted by 2 Irish prelates. Who were they? E. H. A. also refers, as his authority, to a tract by the Rev. Darwall, in Christian's Miscellany, but he does not give the date of that publication, nor did I ever hear of it. Surely some ecclesiastical reader of N and Q will answer some, at least, of these inquiries of mine. I know many of your subscribers can do so if they choose. I am desirous of possessing the names and dates of consecration and death of every Roman Catholic vicar apostolic appointed for England since 1689, and also of those for Scotland, if possible. A.S.A. Wazirabad. Smock Marriages. Scotch Law of Marriage. Volume 7, page 191. To a certain extent, the information Mr. F. H. Brett got from his Scotch friend is correct. An idea does exist in some parts of Scotland that children born out of wedlock must be under the apron string at the solemnization of the marriage of their parents, before they can be legitimated per subsequens matrimonium. How this notion originated, I do not pretend to say, but it is easy to speculate as to its origin. But Mr. Brett's friend showed a blessed ignorance of the laws of his native country, if he ever said that. In the Scotch law of marriage there is a clause providing that all under the apron string, at the time of the marriage, shall be considered legitimate. The Scotch law of marriage is not statutory, and consequently it has no clauses. Mr. F. H. Brett. Mr. Brett's. I have often felt sore at the ignorance displayed, even in well-informed circles in England, as to the real principles of the Scotch law of marriage, and I am encouraged by the comprehensive terms of Mr. Brett's query, to hope that you will permit me to say a word or two which may serve to dissipate some of the delusions that prevail as to both the constitution of a Scotch marriage and its effects. Mr. Brett's. In Scotland, as in every country whose system of jurisprudence is based on the civil law, marriage is dealt with as a purely civil contract, and its constitution may be established by the same proof as would establish any ordinary civil contract, viz., by writing, by the testimony of witnesses, or by the judicial confession of the parties. It is true that, in deference to the natural feeling that the blessing of God should be invoked upon the constitution of a relation so important and so solemn, and from other considerations of public policy and morality, the law has prescribed that a regular marriage can be performed only by a clergyman, after due proclamation of the banns, and that it punishes an irregular constitution of the contract by fines and other penalties. But it never loses sight of the principle that the contract is purely civil. An irregularity in point of form, though punishable, does not vitiate the contract, which is binding and valid if its substance be proved, in the same way as any other contract may be proved. Such a contract is binding, if entered into in accordance with the lex loci contractus, although that law should differ from the law of the domicile of the parties. The sole privilege of the smith of Gretna Green consisted in his smithy being the nearest place to the English border, at which witnesses to the constitution of the contract could be obtained. Nowadays, I suppose, a runaway couple, unable to hire a special train, would take the express, and I would advise them to take their tickets to Ecclefechan, the first Scotch station at which the express stops, and to confer on the station master and porter there the dignity of high priests of Hymen, for they, or any other two witnesses you meet in Scotland, can help you to tie the knot as firmly as the Gretna Smith. After what I have said, I need hardly add that these functionaries had no warrant for their certificate that their marriages were performed according to the forms of the Church of Scotland. To those who look upon marriage as a purely civil contract, the mock ceremony at Gretna is a marriage. To those who look upon it as a sacrament, or who think that a religious ceremony affects its constitution in the slightest degree, a Gretna Green marriage is, in plain words, either more nor less than a legalized concubinage. And surely, I need not say, that the spouses in such a marriage, though, quod omnem civilum affectum, on the same footing with persons regularly married in facie ecclesi, are not, in Scotland, at least, allowed to obtrude themselves into respectable society. So much for the constitution of the contract of marriage under the law of Scotland. As for its effects, in so far as involved in Mr. Brett's query, no such provision exists, or ever did exist, in the Scotch law of marriage, as that children, to be legitimatized per subsequens matrimonium, must be under their mother's apron strings. In its effects, as well as in its constitution, the contract of marriage in Scotland is ruled by the principles of the civil law, and all the children of the spouses, born before marriage, are legitimated per subsequens matrimonium, whether, at the time the ceremony is performed, they be under the apron strings, or not. The old theory was, that marriage being a consensual contract, the constitution of the rights and obligations arising from it drew back to the date of the consent, which, in the case of parties who had previously had connection, was presumed in law to be the date of the connection. This theory has of late been somewhat impaired by the decision of the Court of Session, in the case of Kerr v. Martin. See Dunlop, Bell and Murray's Reports of Cases Decided in the Court of Session, Volume 2, page 752. The soundness of that decision is still matter of controversy in the profession, but I may refer Mr. Brett to it as containing a full and able discussion of the whole principles on which the Scotch law of marriage is founded. Mr. Brett. An advocate. I remember that my brother, when curate of a parish in Lincolnshire between 1838 and 1844, married a woman enveloped only in a sheet. He was of course startled at the slenderness of her apparel, but as all the requisitions of the law had been complied with, he did not feel himself at liberty to refuse. He contented himself, therefore, with addressing the numerous congregation on the behavior he expected from them at a religious ordinance, and all went off well. The reason for the bride so presenting herself was of course the popular opinion that her new husband would not be liable for her debts. Anon. Photographic notes and queries. Mr. Weld Taylor's process. As I presume the object of publishing photographic notes, and c. is to aid those who are not proficients in the processes indicated, Mr. Weld Taylor must not take umbrage at his first communication being misunderstood, whether unavoidably or wilfully, as I am sure the former must have been the case with all novices in the photographic art at least. However, I had no intention whatever of offering any annoyance to Mr. Taylor in my remarks, which were intended solely with a view to produce an effect which has partially been successful, that of exciting a more definite explanation of his meaning. That Mr. Weld Taylor may enlighten me is not only possible, but very probable, and I can only say I shall be much obliged to him for so doing. Mr. Weld Taylor. With reference to his process for iodizing Canson's paper, I presume his meaning to be as follows, viz. Mix half an ounce of a 40-grain solution of nitrate of silver with an equal quantity of a 50-grain solution of iodide of potassium, by which a precipitate of iodide of silver will be formed. The supernatant fluid containing the excess of iodide of potassium and the nitrate of potash formed by the decomposition. Add drop by drop a solution of the cyanide of potassium, until the iodide of silver is redissolved, and the liquid becomes limpid, and then 4 ounces more of distilled water, making up 5 ounces altogether. The paper should then be washed over with the above and dried, after which it may be floated on water slightly acidulated with sulfuric acid for a few minutes, and after being again dried, either wholly, or else partially with blotting paper, may be rendered sensitive with a weak solution of nitrate of silver. Here are 2 or 3 points admitting doubt. First, would it not be better to wash away the nitrate of potash and free iodide of potash first, and then dissolve the iodide of silver in solution of cyanide of potassium? Secondly, would not a slight soaking in plain water after the acidulated bath be of advantage? Thirdly, is it better to dry the paper again before rendering it sensitive? And fourthly, what strength of nitrate of silver solution should be used to render it sensitive, and ought it to have any acetic or gallic acid, or both? George Shadbolt. George Shadbolt. Animal charcoal in photography. Perhaps you or one of your photographic correspondents would inform me whether the animal charcoal, recommended for the acetonitrate of silver solution, should be used as a filter, or simply allowed to remain in the bottom of the bottle? A. B. C. Oxford. Sir W. Newton on use of common soda and alum. In reply to W. Adrien Delfrier, who is desirous of knowing the rationale of the action of the common soda and powdered alum, and c. My motive for using common soda to cleanse the negatives is that it not only removes the hyposulfite of soda more readily, but any impurities which may be in the paper, as well as the whole of the size, such being absolutely necessary for the after-waxing process, which, when done, the negative should appear nearly as transparent as glass. W. Adrien Delfrier. The reason why I prefer alum for the positives is that while it has the effect of removing the hyposulfite of soda and other impurities in the paper, it does not act upon the size, which in this instance it is desirous to retain. I have been induced to make a series of experiments, with a view to prevent the fading of the positives, or, indeed, that any portion should be, as it were, eaten away in parts, and since I have adopted the foregoing, in no one instance has any change taken place whatever. W. J. Newton. W. J. Newton. 6. Argyle Street. Difficulties in photographic practice. Having met with some of the difficulties that your correspondent G. H. mentions in his communication, Volume 7, page 218, I beg to offer a few hints which I think will be of service to those who are trying the waxed paper process. With regard to the spots, it is not easy to know whether they are produced by particles of iron in the paper, or by the oxide of silver. Legray says, if spots should form, produced by the oxide of silver, they may be removed by pouring over the negative some acetic acid, and passing a brush lightly over it. The second difficulty, want of depth of tone or intensity in the negative, may have been caused by too short an exposure in the camera, or not having used the proper proportion of developing solution. Try the following: 4 ounces dist water, 8 grains gallic acid. When this solution has been filtered, add to it 1/2 dram of the acetonitr of silver solution and 1 dram of acetic acid. I have generally put a little camphor in the gallic acid solution, as recommended by Laborde. It prevents the decomposition of the gallic acid, and renders the image clearer and free from spots. A piece about the size of a pea for 4 or 5 ounces of solution. As to the third difficulty, I believe nothing but replacing the porcelain dishes by glass ones will prevent the dirty marbled appearance in the bottom of the dishes made of porcelain. They are generally rough and uneven on the surface, and there are often what is called kiln cracks in the angular parts. 2 months ago I bought 2 glass dishes. Although they are more than double the price of porcelain, I expect the annoyance of dirty dishes is prevented. The glass ones are made quite round at the sides and ends, and of course will be easily cleaned. I am informed they are made in France, but they could be had of English manufacture. The animal charcoal in the sensitive solution must be shaken up in the acetonitrate solution, and when it has become quite clear, the solution before using must be filtered into the dish. R. Elliot. R. Elliot. Penciller Iron Works. Replies to Minor Queries. The Countess of Pembroke's Letter, Volume 1, pages 28. 119, 154, Volume 7, page 154. None of your correspondents seem to be aware that the paper in the World, No. 14. April 5, 1753, in which this questioned letter first appeared, was written by Horace Walpole, and was afterwards reproduced by him in his Royal and Noble Authors. These facts may help to guide inquirers, but they seem to me not to testify much for the authenticity of the piece. This, among many publications in the world, would certainly prove nothing, but Walpole's venturing to reproduce it in an acknowledged work to which he attached considerable importance is no doubt of some weight. See Ethnology of England, Volume 7, page 135. In reference to that portion of the query by Ethnologicus which asks whether it is yet clearly settled that there are types of the heads of ancient Britons, Saxons, Danes, and other races, to be referred to as standards or examples of the respective crania of those people, I beg to say that beneath the chancel of the church of St. Leonard, Hythe, there is a crypt containing a vast number of skulls and other human bones, which, according to Jeake, the historian of the Cinque Ports, are Ethnologicus. Supposed by some to be gathered at the shore after a great sea fight and slaughter of the French and English on that coast, whose carcasses, or their bones, after the consumption of the flesh, might be cast up there, and so gathered and reserved for memorandum. Speaking of these relics, Walker, in his Physiology, says, "These skulls at Hythe are not of one race, either Saxon or British, but of several. Two forms of skull, very distinct from each other, predominate: one, a long narrow skull, greatly resembling the Celtic of the present day; the other, a short broad skull, greatly resembling the Gothic. Another kind of skulls, fewer in number, are evidently Roman skulls." Robert Wright. Robert Wright. Drake the Artist, Volume 6, page 555. Searching a series of catalogues of the Society of Artists of Great Britain, from 1760 to 1780, I find that Mr. Drake at York, FSA, Fellow of that Society, in 1773 exhibited at their new room, near Exeter Change in the Strand. Number 89. A family in Little. In Little. Is this to be interpreted by Hamlet's sarcasm upon the sycophants of his uncle's court, who paid 40, 50, nay, 100 ducats for his portrait in Little? Small full-lengths were in vogue at the period, but our Yorkist has a delicate diminutive of his own. Again, in 1775, we have 3 works of Drake. 72. View of a gentleman's seat in Yorkshire, with 2 gentlemen going out a-hawking. 73. Saccharissa with Amoret and Musidora. From Thomson's Seasons 4-2. Edition, 1730. 74. A Winter Piece. And in 1776. 23. A Madonna and Child. Mr. Drake, FSA, York. There is no trace of him at the Royal Academy. Thus we have him in portraiture, in landscape, in sacred history, and in the poetical imaginative. This is beyond what G. reckons upon, and now, having contributed thus much, I hope some of your readers may assist in carrying the inquiry further. J. H. A. Sparse, Volume 6, page 554, Volume 7, page 51, said to be an Americanism. I have in my possession an edition, printed in 1611, of the whole Book of Psalms, collected into English metre, by Thomas Sternhold, John Hopkins, and others. In the paraphrase of Psalm 44, v. 10, is the following: Thou madest us fly before our foes, and so were overtrod. Our enemies robbed and spoiled our goods, when we were sparsed abroad. The word here used in 1611 was evidently no American one, and yet it is singular that neither Bailey, 1740, Johnson, 1755, or Barclay, 1800, have the word in their dictionaries, but Knowles, 1835, and Blackie's Imperial, 1850, both mentioned it, and have sparse, sparsed, sparsely, and sparsing, all meaning dispersed, or scattered. John Algor. John Algor. Eldon Street, Sheffield. Genevieve of Brabant, Volume 7, page 212. There is a ballad on her legend in an obscure volume of verses published by Masters, 1846, fantastically entitled Echoes from Old Cornwall. Coriolanus. Coriolanus. N.B. These echoes do not appear to have resounded far or wide. God's Marks, Volume 7, page 134. In the Register Book of St. Margaret's, Westminster, occurs this entry, under the year 1556. Junii Vij die. Idem Elizabeth Helhe, of the ague with God's Marks. Shakespeare adopts the saying, "They have the plague. For the Lord's tokens on you do I see." Love's Labour's Lost, Act v. Sc. 2. Quoted in Memorials of Westminster, ch. 4. Page 152. They were the first spots which showed that the infection had been caught. M.W. Sigantium Portus, Volume 7, page 180. I know not what Prestoniensis means by Ptolemy's History of Britain, but there can be little doubt as to the whereabouts of what is called, in the Palatine MS, Sigantium Portus, or Sitantium Portus in Berthius's great edition of Ptolemy's Geography, ch. 3. Tit. Albion, tab. 1. Prestoniensis. It is curious that the place immediately preceding in Ptolemy's catalogue that inquired about affords, in the vast multitude enumerated in that work, the closest approach to identity between the ancient and modern names, viz. Mu omicron o iota kappa alpha mu beta eta iota sigma chi sigma iota, Morecambe estuarium, still called Tautidem Literis and Edom Sonans, Morecambe Bay, in which Ulverston is the chief town, so that of this point there can be no doubt. Then comes Sitantium Portus, of which Montanus, Burtius, and subsequent geographers give Windermere as the modern name, meaning of course the mouth of the river through which Lake Windermere discharges itself into Morecambe Bay. But I doubt this, for there is no town of Windermere, nor indeed any other, that Ptolemy could have called a harbour, Portus, till we come to Lancaster, which I therefore incline to believe was the Portus Sitantium. After this Portus comes Belisama Estuarium, by which all interpreters understand the mouth of the Ribble, which is probably the point that interests Prestoniensis, as Preston stands on that river. The conjecture that Lancaster was the Portus Sitantium is corroborated by the latitudes and longitudes given by Ptolemy, which, though not to be absolutely relied on, are not to be disregarded, and which give to the three places, Morecambe Estuarium, Sitantium Portus, and Belisama Estuarium, nearly the relative positions in which we find Ulverston, Lancaster, and the Ribble. Mu omicron rho iota kappa alpha mu beta eta iota sigma chi sigma iota. Prestoniensis. C. Rubrical Query, Volume 6, page 509. Quester inquires the meaning of the words, "if occasion lie," in the rubric immediately before the offertory in the communion service. I am under the impression that, "if occasion lie," here simply means, in case there is necessity to do so, and for the origin of this parenthetical clause I would refer to the rubric of 1549 Keeling, lit. Br. edit. Of 1842, page 178, which provides, Quester. That in cathedral churches, or places where there is daily communion, it shall be sufficient to read this exhortation once in a month, and in parish churches on the weekdays it may be left unsaid. Showing clearly the mode in which the exhortation was intended to be used. The real difficulty, however, is not noticed by your querist, which is, as to when public warning of the communion is to be given. One rubric says that this notice is to be given immediately after the Nicene Creed. Another prescribes that when this warning is to be given, it shall be done immediately after sermon. On this point see Sharp on Rubrics, page 62, and Wheatley on Common Prayer, chapter 6. Sect. 8, section 3. In Ivry. Rosa Mystica, volume 7, page 182. I do not remember to have ever heard of such an institution, but Rosa Mystica is one of the many appellatives of the Virgin Mary in the Roman Catholic Litanies of the Virgin. C. Portrait of Charles I, volume 7, page 185. It may be confidently asserted that Van Dyck never painted in enamel. The enamels referred to were at best only, after Van Dyck, nothing more frequent, in both earlier and present times, than the copying large oil portraits in enamel. C. Time and I, volume 7, page 182. I cannot answer Mr. Blackiston's query fully, but he will find, I think, in the miscellaneous correspondence usually printed in Pope's and Swift's works, the following anecdote, that someone having quoted to Robert, Lord Oxford, the adage, Mr. Blackiston's time and I gainst any two, his lordship replied impromptu, chance and I gains time in you. See The Word Party, volume 7, page 177. I can furnish a more ancient example of the use of this word than the one given by your correspondent. In an old MS. Book of Recepts, in my possession, of the year 1681-2, there occurs the following singular prescription. The powder of bugs. Take the bugs and wash them well in white wine, and put them in a new earthen pot, and set them in an oven till they be dry enough for powder, then beat them, and sift them, and give ye party as much as will lie upon a groat every morning in honey. Can any one inform me for what disease this nauseous remedy was prescribed, and whether it be now excluded from the pharmacopoeia? Perhaps this oleaginous insect was formerly exhibited in those cases for which cod liver oil is now so extensively used. G. Your correspondent E. D. might have gone much farther back for an example of the use of the word party for a particular person. In The Tempest, Act 3, Sc. 2, we have, "Shall I say by sorcery he got this isle? From me he got it. If thy greatness will, revenge it on him, for I know thou darest. But this thing dare not. St. That's most certain. Cal thou shalt be lord of it, and I'll serve thee. St. How now shall this be compassed? Canst thou bring me to the party? Erica. Warwick. Moderate and 80. N.C. Volume 7, page 155. In reply to your correspondent who asks where the following lines, moderate and 80. N.C. are to be found, I refer him to the following note in Greswell's account of Runcorn, page 34. Leland, in his itinerary, mentions an old woman, a native of over in Cheshire, who lived in the family of Downs of Shrigley, and died at the age of 140 years. Suingerus reports of a noble lady of Worms, in the Archbishopric of Mentz, who lived to see the 6th generation, that she might thus address her daughter. 1. Mater 2 nati die 3 nati filia 4 natum. Uti manit 5 nati plangir 6 filiolum. That is, the mother says to her daughter, Daughter, bid thy daughter, to tell her daughter, that her daughter's daughter is crying. Anon. Warrington. I have in my possession a scrapbook, compiled by one Edward King in the year 1743, which consists of extracts from newspapers of that date, and while perusing your last number, meeting with W.S. Malta, query, I immediately recollected having noticed the quotation some short time ago. Turning to the volume, I find the following extract. Sarum, April 30th. We hear from Lymington in Hants that one Mrs. Mitchell was lately brought to bed there of a daughter, whose great-great-grandmother is still living, and has already seen her 5th generation, and all daughters. So that she may say the same that the distich doth, made on one of the Dalberga's family of Basil. 1 Mater 8 2 nati die 3 nati filia 4 natum uti manit 5 nati plandir 6 filiolum. 1 Rise up, 2 daughter, and go to thy 3 daughter, for her 4 daughters 5 daughter hath a 6th daughter. 1 Mater 8 2 nati die 3 nati filia 4 natum uti manit 5 nati plangir 6 filiolum. 1 Rise up, 2 daughter, and go to thy 3 daughter, for her 4 daughters 5 daughter hath a 6th daughter. She is about 92 years of age, is in perfect health, has all her senses clear, and hopes to see 5 generations more. Ty. Norwood, Surrey. Gospel Place, Volume 7, page 133. In my parish there are 2 such places, both on the border of the parish. One is called the Gospel Oak, the other the Gospel Bush. The traditional explanation of these names is this, that at no very ancient date, when the custom of perambulating the parish was annually observed, portions of the Gospel were read at these and other places, stations, as they were anciently called. John Jebb. Peterstowe Rectory, Ross. Passage in Thompson, Volume 7, page 87. Steaming, as your intelligent correspondent C. says, is clearly the true reading. The word is so printed in the 4th edition of the Seasons, 1730. Was not this the first collected edition of that poem, and in every other to which I have referred? It does not, however, occur in the 4-2 copy in the 28th, but in the 31st line. The 4 lines, 15th to 18th, originally given in the hymn, but afterwards wisely omitted by the poet, follow the words, "In autumn unconfined, thrown from thy lap, profuse o'er nature falls the lucid shower of beamy fruits, and in a radiant stream, into the stores of sterile winter pours." The steaming property of the earth is well described by Dr. Carpenter, in his Vegetable Physiology, page 168. If a glass vessel be placed with its mouth downwards on the surface of a meadow or grass plot during a sunny afternoon in summer, it will speedily be rendered dim in the interior by the watery vapor which will rise into it, and this will soon accumulate to such a degree as to run down in drops. Any person walking in a meadow on which the sun is shining powerfully, where the grass has not long previously been refreshed by rain, may observe a tremulous motion in distant objects, occasioned by the rising of the watery vapor, exactly resembling that which takes place along the seashore, when the sun shines strongly on pebbles that have been left in a moistened state by the retiring tide. Dr. Carpenter's Vegetable Physiology, page 168. Sect. 253. The atmosphere is made up of several steams, or minute particles of several sorts rising from the earth and the waters. Locke's Elements of Natural Philosophy. J. H. M. Words are given to man to conceal his thoughts. Volume 7, page 165. The hexameter line, Kai Taupsilin Omicron Nu, and C, is one put by Homer into the mouth of Achilles, Iliad 9. 3:13, when he is expressing his indignant hatred of liars. Kai Taupsilin Omicron Nu. R.T. R.T. Warmington. Folger Family, Volume 6, page 583, Volume 7, page 51. Will it assist the inquiry to say that there was a family of Folgers at Norwich? The only son was a curate at Leiston, in Suffolk, in 1832. B. B. Woodward. B. B. Woodward. Miscellaneous. Notes on Books, etc. The remarkable collection of Northern Irish antiquities and historical relics, exhibited at Belfast on the occasion of the British Association meeting in that city, has led to the publication of the Ulster Journal of Archaeology, which is to be conducted by gentlemen of the province, and principally devoted to the elucidation of the antiquities and ancient history of Ulster. Ulster, it will be remembered, is historically remarkable as being the last part of Ireland which held out against the English sway, and which therefore retained its ancient customs until a comparatively recent period. Ulster was also the battlefield of the ancient native Irish chieftains and the Scandinavian Vikings. The antiquaries of Ulster have therefore done wisely, while the tangled web of Northern Irish history can yet be unraveled by existing aids, while the men who are now the depositories of family and local history are yet among them, to commence this journal, and in the tact and good management displayed in the selection of the materials of their opening number, they have not only done wisely, but done well also. May they go on and prosper. At a moment when all eyes are looking anxiously for the new volume of Nineveh Discoveries, we have received a work of kindred character and of very high value. It is entitled Laras and Penates, or Cilicia and its Governors, being a short historical account of that province from the earliest times to the present day, together with a description of some household gods of the ancient Cilicians, broken up by them on their conversion to Christianity, first discovered and brought to this country by the author, W. B. Barker, edited by W. F. Ainsworth. And the interest which this title naturally excites is fully maintained upon a perusal of the work. Although, by readers who care little for its archaeological features, the work will be read with the highest satisfaction, it is one which will afford to the antiquary information of the greatest importance, while to many, the announcement that the remarkable monuments of the ancient Cilicians, so happily discovered by Mr. Barker, were discovered by him in the city dignified by the birth of the great apostle of the Gentiles, and that the mutilation of these works of art, once the objects of religious regard, was probably the consequence of the missionary visit of Paul and Silas to Tarsus, will probably be the strongest recommendation which this work could receive. We have received 3 catalogues which call for such mention as should direct to them the attention of our bibliographical friends. One is of the splendid library of Mr. Dawson Turner, which will occupy Messrs. Sotheby and Wilkinson for 13 days in its disposal. The next, Bibliotheca Americana, is of a most remarkable collection of American books on sale by Mr. Russell Smith. The third is of an extensive collection of theological works on sale by Mr. Straker. The last two are made more valuable by the addition of useful indices. Books received: A Manual of Photography, by Robert Hunt, 3rd edition enlarged. It is sufficient to say that Professor Hunt's volume is at once the most elaborate, as his acquirements will ensure its being one of the most scientific works extant upon this now popular subject. Memoirs of a Maitre d'Armes, or 18 Months at St. Petersburg, by A. Dumas, translated by the Marquis of Ormond, is one of the most amusing and graphic among the many amusing and graphic volumes which have already appeared in the Traveller's Library. Cyclopedia Bibliographica. Part 6. Mr. Darling's useful cyclopedia maintains its character. The Fall of Jerusalem, by the Rev. Dr. Milman. This endeavor to direct the public mind, through the medium of this dramatic poem, to the striking and incontestable evidence of the full completion of prophecy in the fall of Jerusalem, is a valuable addition to Murray's Railway Reading. We must here acknowledge the receipt of 2 other volumes of poetry: Beauty, a poem, by the author of Silent Love, an admirer and not unsuccessful imitator of Pope, and Love in the Moon, by Patrick Scott, a work in which scientific observation is combined with great poetic feeling and considerable power. The Pilgrim's Progress of John Bunyan, for the use of children in the English Church, edited by the Rev. J. M. Neal. The object with which this beautiful edition has been prepared is so plainly stated that we need only wish the book as wide a circulation as it deserves. The Family Shakespeare, and C. by Thomas Bowdler. The 4th volume of this reprint of Mr. Bowdler's carefully revised edition of Shakespeare contains the 3 parts of Henry VI, Richard III, Henry VIII, and Timon of Athens. Books received: Books and odd volumes. Wanted to purchase: Transactions of the Microscopical Society of London, Volume 1, and Parts 1 and 2 of Volume 2. Transactions of the Microscopical Society of London. Curtis's Botanical Magazine. 1st and 2nd series collected. Curtis's Botanical Magazine. Todd's Cyclopedia of Anatomy and Physiology. Complete, or any portion. Todd's Cyclopedia of Anatomy and Physiology. Gladstone's W. E. 2 letters to the Earl of Aberdeen on the state prosecutions of the Neapolitan government. 1st edition. 8 vo. Gladstone's W. E. 2 letters to the Earl of Aberdeen on the state prosecutions of the Neapolitan government. Swift's Works. Dublin G. Faulkner. 19 volumes 8 vo. 1768. Volume 1. Swift's Works. Pursuit of Knowledge Under Difficulties. Original edition. Vol I. Pursuit of Knowledge Under Difficulties. The Book of Adam. The Book of Adam. Prideaux's Connection of the Old and New Testament. Volume 1, 1718. Prideaux's Connection of the Old and New Testament. The Christian Magazine. Volume for 1763. The Christian Magazine. Pro matrimonio principis cum defuncti uxoris soror contracto responsum juris collegii juris consultorum in Academia Rintellensi, circa 1655. Pro matrimonio principis cum defuncti uxoris soror contracto responsum juris collegii juris consultorum in Academia Rintellensi. Mana jurisconsult. De matrimonio. Mana jurisconsult. De matrimonio. Bruckner, de matrimonio. Bruckner, de matrimonio. Bedell's Irish Old Testament, Irish type, 4-2, 1685. A copy of O'Donnell's Irish New Testament, Irish type, 4-2, first edition, 1602, being rare, is offered in exchange. Bedell's Irish Old Testament. Percy Society Publications. Numbers 93 and 94. Percy Society Publications. Southey's Works. Volume 10, Longmans. 1838. Southey's Works. Scott's Continuation of Milner's Church History. Volumes 2 and 3 or 2 only. Scott's Continuation of Milner's Church History. The Dragon of Wantley by H. Carey. The Dragon of Wantley. H. Carey. Asterisk correspondents sending lists of books wanted are requested to send their names. Asterisk letters, stating particulars and lowest price, carriage free, to be sent to Mr. Bell, publisher of Notes and Queries, 186 Fleet Street. Mr. Bell. Notices to correspondents. We have to request the indulgence of several correspondents for not replying to them this week. S. G. W. Gibraltar is a corruption of Jebel Tariq, or the Hill of Tariq, a name derived from the Moorish conqueror who landed there April 30, 711. For the origin of its ancient name, Kalpe, we must refer S. G. W. to Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Geography, where the various presumed etymologies are discussed. Percy Anecdotes. Mr. Timms has requested us to correct a slight error in his communication on this subject, ante, page 214. The Percy Anecdotes were completed in 40 parts, and not 44, as there stated. Percy Anecdotes. Broctona. Could the article proposed be divided into 2 papers? Broctona. Mr. Crooks. Where can we address a letter on a photographic subject to this correspondent? Mr. Crooks. Our 6th volume, strongly bound in cloth, with very copious index, is now ready, price 10s. 60. A few complete sets of Notes and Queries, volumes I to 6, price 3 guineas for the 6 volumes, may now be had, for which early application is desirable. Our 6th volume, Notes and Queries. Notes and Queries is published at noon on Friday, so that the country booksellers may receive copies in that night's parcel, and deliver them to their subscribers on the Saturday. Notes and Queries. Photography. Xyloiodide of silver, prepared solely by R. W. Thomas, has now obtained in European fame. It supersedes the use of all other preparations of collodion. Witness the subjoined testimonial. 122, Regent Street. Dear Sir, in answer to your inquiry of this morning, I have no hesitation in saying that your preparation of collodion is incomparably better and more sensitive than all the advertised collodioiodides, which, for my professional purposes, are quite useless when compared to yours. I remain, dear Sir, yours faithfully, N. Henneman. N. Henneman. August 30th, 1852. To Mr. R. W. Thomas. Mr. R. W. Thomas begs most earnestly to caution photographers against purchasing impure chemicals, which are now too frequently sold at very low prices. It is to this cause nearly always that their labors are unattended with success. Chemicals of absolute purity, especially prepared for this art, may be obtained from R. W. Thomas, chemist and professor of photography, 10. Pall Mall. N.B. The name of Mr. T.'s preparation, xyloiodide of silver, is made use of by unprincipled persons. To prevent imposition, each bottle is stamped with a red label bearing the maker's signature. To photographers. Mr. Philip Delamotte begs to announce that he has now made arrangements for printing calotypes in large or small quantities, either from paper or glass negatives. Gentlemen who are desirous of having good impressions of their works may see specimens of Mr. Delamotte's printing at his own residence, 38 Chepstow Place, Bayswater, or at Mr. George Bell's, 186 Fleet Street. Photographic Pictures. A selection of the above beautiful productions may be seen at Bland and Long's, 153 Fleet Street, where may also be procured apparatus of every description, and pure chemicals for the practice of photography in all its branches. Calotype, daguerreotype, and glass pictures for the stereoscope. Bland and Long, opticians, philosophical and photographical instrument makers, and operative chemists, 153 Fleet Street. Photography. Horn and Company's iodized collodion, for obtaining instantaneous views, and portraits in from 3 to 30 seconds, according to light. Portraits obtained by the above, for delicacy of detail rival the choicest daguerreotypes, specimens of which may be seen at their establishment. Also every description of apparatus, chemicals, and used in this beautiful art. 123 and 121. Newgate Street. Ross's photographic portrait and landscape lenses. These lenses give correct definition at the center and margin of the picture, and have their visual and chemical acting foci coincident. Great Exhibition Jurors Reports, page 274. Mr. Ross prepares lenses for portraiture having the greatest intensity yet produced, by procuring the coincidence of the chemical actinic and visual rays. The spherical aberration is also very carefully corrected, both in the central and oblique pencils. Mr. Ross has exhibited the best camera in the exhibition. It is furnished with a double achromatic object lens, about 3 inches aperture. There is no stop, the field is flat, and the image very perfect up to the edge. Catalogue sent upon application. A. Ross 2. Featherstone Buildings, High Holborn. Just published, price 1s, free by post 1s, 4d. The waxed paper photographic process of Gustave Legray's new edition. Translated from the French. Sole agents in the United Kingdom for Voigtlander and Sons celebrated lenses for portraits and views. General Depot for Turners, Watmans, Canson Frères, La Croix, and other Talbot-type papers. Pure photographic chemicals. Instructions and specimens in every branch of the art. George Knight and Sons, Foster Lane, London. Photographic paper. Negative and positive papers of Watmans, Turners, Sanfords, and Canson Frères make. Wax paper for Legray's process. Iodized and sensitive paper for every kind of photography. Sold by John Sanford, photographic stationer, Aldine Chambers, 13. Paternoster Row, London. Photography. Collodion, iodized with the ammonioiodide of silver. J. B. Hawken and Company, chemists, 289. Strand were the first in England who published the application of this agent. See Athenaeum, August 14th. Their collodion, price 9d per ounce, retains its extraordinary sensitiveness, tenacity, and color unimpaired for months. It may be exported to any climate, and the iodizing compound mixed as required. J. B. Hawken and Company manufacture pure chemicals and all apparatus with the latest improvements adapted for all the photographic and daguerreotype processes. Cameras for developing in the open country. Glass baths adapted to any camera. Lenses from the best makers. Waxed and iodized papers, and C. Bennett's model watch, as shown at the Great Exhibition. Number 1. Class X. In gold and silver cases, in 5 qualities, and adapted to all climates, may now be had at the manufactory, 65. Cheapside. Superior gold London-made patent levers, 17, 15, and 12 guineas. Ditto, in silver cases, 8, 6, and 4 guineas. First-rate Geneva levers, in gold cases, 12, 10, and 8 guineas. Ditto, in silver cases, 8, 6, and 5 guineas. Superior lever, with chronometer balance, gold, 27, 23, and 19 guineas. Bennett's pocket chronometer, gold, 50 guineas, silver, 40 guineas. Every watch skillfully examined, timed, and its performance guaranteed. Barometers 2L, 3L, and 4L, thermometers from 1S, each. Bennett, watch, clock, and instrument maker to the Royal Observatory, the Board of Ordnance, the Admiralty, and the Queen. 65. Cheapside. Kerr and Strang, perfumers and wig makers, 124. Leadenhall Street, London, respectfully inform the nobility and public that they have invented and brought to the greatest perfection the following leading articles, besides numerous others: their ventilating natural curl, ladies' and gentlemen's perukes, either crops or full dress, with partings and crowns so natural as to defy detection, and with or without their improved metallic springs, ventilating fronts, bandeaus, borders, nats, bands a la reine, and C. Also their instantaneous liquid hair dye, the only dye that really answers for all colors, and never fades nor acquires that unnatural red or purple tint common to all other dyes. It is permanent, free of any smell, and perfectly harmless. Any lady or gentleman, skeptical of its effects in dyeing any shade of color, can have it applied, free of any charge, at Kerr and Strang's, 124 Leadenhall Street. Sold in cases at 7s, 6d, 15s, and 20s, samples 3s, 60, sent to all parts on receipt of post office order or stamps. Elgin Marbles. Arundel Society, established 1849, for promoting the knowledge of art. Casts from Mr. Cheverton's reductions of the Theseus and Ulysses in the Elgin collection may be had by application at Messrs. Colnagi's, 14 Pall Mall East, price 1L, 1S, to members 12s, 60, each. Electro-bronze copies of the Theseus may be had at Messrs. Elkington's, 22 Regent Street, price 10L, 10S, to members 9L, 9S. Mr. Cheverton obtained a prize medal for the Theseus at the Great Exhibition, 1851. Annual subscription to the Society 1L, 1S, entitling members to all engravings and books published. Payable at Coutts Bank, or 14 Pall Mall East. G. Aubrey Betsy Hahn, Section. 10,000 volumes of most rare, curious, valuable, and splendid books, and books of prints, ancient richly illuminated manuscripts upon vellum, etc. J. Lilly, in announcing his removal from Pall Mall to his former residence, 19 King Street, Covent Garden, begs to intimate that he is preparing a catalogue of a very choice and valuable collection of books, the whole recently purchased at the sale of the libraries of the late Earl of Mount Norris, formerly Viscount Valentia, at Arley Castle, Staffordshire, Hugh Thomas, Esq., of Beaumaris, Rev. Herbert C. Marsh, the very eminent architect, A. W. Pugin, Esq., H. P. Burrell, Esq., of Smyrna, and various other sources. The whole in fine condition, in appropriate and elegant bindings. This catalogue, with the succeeding ones for this year, will be forwarded to any gentleman enclosing 12 postage stamps. Joseph Lilly, 19 King Street, Covent Garden, London. Western Life Assurance and Annuity Society. 3 Parliament Street, London. Founded AD 1842. Directors: H. E. Bicknell, ESQW, Cabell, ESQT, S. Cox, June, ESQ, MPG, H. Drew, ESQW, Evans, ESQW, Freeman, ESQF, Fuller, ESQ. J. H. Goodhart, ESQT, Gristle, ESQJ, Hunt, ESQJ, A. Lethbridge, ESQE, Lucas, ESQJ, Liz Seeger, ESQJ, B. White, ESQJ, Carter Wood, ESQ. Trustees: W. Waitley, ESQ, QC, L. C. Humphrey, ESQ, QC, George Drew, ESQ, Physician. William Rich. Basham, MD, Bankers. Messrs. Cox, Biddulph, and Company, Charing Cross. Valuable privilege. Policies effected in this office do not become void through temporary difficulty in paying a premium, as permission is given upon application to suspend the payment at interest, according to the conditions detailed in the prospectus. Specimens of rates of premium for assuring 100L, with a share in 3/4 of the profits. Age: S. D. Age: S. D. 17. 1. 14. 4. 32. 2. 10. 8. 22. 1. 18. 8. 37. 2. 18. 6. 27. 2. 4. 5. 42. 3. 8. 2. Arthur Scratchley, M.A. FRAS, Actuary. Now ready, price 10s. 60. Second edition, with material additions, Industrial Investment and Emigration, being a treatise on benefit building societies, and on the general principles of land investment, exemplified in the cases of freehold land societies, building companies, and c. with a mathematical appendix on compound interest and life assurance. By Arthur Scratchley, M.A., Actuary to the Western Life Assurance Society, 3. Parliament Street, London. New Archaeological and Historical Publications. Ackermann's Remains of Pagan Saxondom. 4-2. With colored plates. Parts 1 to 3. 2s. 60 each. Numismatic Chronicle and Journal of the Numismatic Society, quarterly. Number 59. 3s. 60. Bowman's Reliquae Antiqui Ebracenses. Remains of Antiquity relating to the County of York. 4-2. Plates. Numbers 1 to 4. 2s. 60 each. The Ulster Journal of Archaeology. 4-2. Part 1, quarterly. 12s. per year. Caulfield's Episcopal and Capitular Seals of the Irish Cathedral Churches. 8vo. Part 1, Cashel and Emly. Plates 1s. 60. Duncan's Archaeological Mine. Comprising the history of the County of Kent. 8vo. Parts 1 to 3. 8d. each. Hunter's Rev. Joseph, Historical and Critical Tracts. Post 8vo. Numbers 1 to 4. 2s. 60 each. Suggestions on the Ancient Britons. 8vo. Part 1, 7s. 60. Publications of the Antiquarian Etching Club for 1852. 4-2. 67 plates. 10s. Annually. Retrospective Review. Comprising copious critical analyses of old books. 8vo. Numbers 1 and 2. Quarterly. 2s. 60 each. John Russell Smith, 36. Soho Square, London. Bond's Standard Library for March. Bond's Standard Library for March. Neander's Church History. Volume 8. With index. Post 8vo. 3s. 60. Henry G. Bone, 4, 5, and 6. York Street, Covent Garden. Bond's Classical Library for March. Bond's Classical Library for March. Cicero's Academics, De Finibus, and Tusculan Questions, translated by C. D. Young, B.A. with introductory sketch of the philosophers and systems referred to by Cicero. Post 8vo. 5s. Henry G. Bone, 4, 5, and 6. York Street, Covent Garden. Bond's Antiquarian Library for March. Bond's Antiquarian Library for March. The Annals of Roger de Hoveden. Comprising the history of England and of other countries of Europe from AD 732 to AD 1201. Translated from the Latin, with notes and illustrations by Henry T. Riley, Esq. B.A., Barrister at Law. In 2 volumes. Volume 1. AD 732 to AD 1180. Post 8vo. 5s. AD. 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 Henry G. Bone, 4, 5, and 6. York Street, Covent Garden. Now ready, with 40 richly colored plates. 4-2. 84s. Saxon obsequies, illustrated by ornaments and weapons discovered in a cemetery near Little Wilbraham, Cambridgeshire, in 1851. By Hon. R. C. Neville. John Murray, Albemarle Street. To antiquaries, etc., to be disposed of, a copy of that rare and curious work, entitled Cocker's Arithmetic, the 27th edition. London, printed for Eben. Tracy, at the 3 Bibles on London Bridge, 1709. Please to address L. M., Post Office, Bexhill. Just published, a second and much enlarged edition, in 1 handsome volume, 8vo, illustrated with 40 plates and 250 woodcuts, half bound in Morocco, 1l, 1s. A few copies on large paper, 2l, 2s. The Roman Wall. An historical, topographical, and descriptive account of the barrier of the Lower Isthmus, extending from the Tyne to the Solway. Deduced from numerous personal surveys. By the Rev. John Collingwood Bruce, M.A., F.S.A., one of the Council of the Society of Antiquaries of Newcastle-on-Tyne. Also, by the same author, 4-2, price 2s, 60. Hadrian, the builder of the Roman Wall. A paper read before the Society of Antiquaries of Newcastle-on-Tyne, August 4, 1852, in reply to The Roman Wall. An attempt to substantiate the claims of Severus to the authorship of The Roman Wall. By Robert Bell. John Russell Smith, 36. Soho Square, London. The Gentleman's Magazine for March contains the following articles. 1. The Masters of the Roman World. 2. The Gulistan, or Rose Garden of Sutti. 3. The Dead, as described by Homer. 4. Mr. Joseph Ames and Dr. Samuel Johnson. 5. The Devereux Earls of Essex. 6. Fra Dulcino and His Times. 7. Memorials of John Home, the author of Douglas. 8. Dr. Cunningham at Florence, Siena, and Rome in 1736. Correspondence. 1. The Ancient Records of Ireland. 2. Richard of Cirencester. 3. Suffragan Bishops. 4. Stephen Y. Castell and the Last Battle of Caractacus. 5. English Etymology, Cheer. 6. The Society of Gregorians. 7. Escape of James II. From the Boyne. With notes of the month, reviews of new publications, historical chronicle, and obituary, including memoirs of the Earl of Stair, Earl Beauchamp, Viscount Melbourne, Right Hon, David Boyle, Right Hon, John Nichol, Peter Borthwick, Esq., Henry Fiennes Clinton, Esq., Rev. Dr. Rice, Rev. P. L. Fraser, Dr. Pereira, W.M. Chadwick, Esq., N.C., N.C., Price 2S, 6D. Correspondence. Obituary. Nichols and Son, 25. Parliament Street. The principal portion of the very important library of Dawson Turner, Esq., extending over 13 days' sail. Messrs. S. Lee Sotheby and John Wilkinson, auctioneers of literary property and works illustrative of the fine arts, will sell by auction, at their house 3. Wellington Street, Strand, on Monday, March 7th, and 5 following days, and on Thursday, March 17th, and 6 following days, Sunday excepted, at 1 precisely each day, the principal part of the library of Dawson Turner, Esq., M.A., F.R.S., F.S.A., F.L.S., and C., removed from Yarmouth, comprising a magnificent assemblage of books on the fine arts, including very many of the splendid galleries and picturesque works published during the last and present centuries. The collection is also rich in English topography and history, and comprises many valuable and rare books in general literature, foreign and English. Some very interesting and beautifully illuminated missals and other books of prayers, also some fine books printed upon vellum. There is one remarkable feature in this important and well-known collection to which it is desirous to call particular attention, namely, that a very great portion of the works are enriched with autograph letters of their respective and eminent authors, and are in very many instances illustrated with additional engravings of much rarity, thereby adding considerable interest to the copies, and rendering them in many instances quite unique. The first division to be viewed on Friday and Saturday, March 4th and 5th, the second division to be viewed on Tuesday and Wednesday, March 15th and 16th. Catalogues are now ready, 2 shillings and 6 each, forwarded, post free, on receipt of 3 shillings. Just published, Dimi 12 mo, in cloth boards, and gilt-lettered, price 10s, 6d, volume 1, with engraved frontispiece, and illustrated with wood engravings. Shakespeare's Puck, and his folklore, illustrated from the superstitions of all nations, but more especially from the earliest religion and rites of Northern Europe and the Wends. By William Bell, Phil. Doctor, honorary member of the Historic Society for Lancashire and Cheshire, and corresponding member of the Society of Antiquaries for Normandy, at Cannes. To whom application to be made at number 17. Gower Place, Euston Square, and sent free to all parts of the kingdom for post office order for 11s. Phil. Dr. Opinions of the Press. Opinions of the Press. He, Dr. B. has caught his tone and treatment from the ingenious and industrious scholars of that part of the continent. There is no speculation too refined, no analogy too subtle and remote, for the employment of their time and talents, and in much that Dr. Bell advances on the same system to establish the intimate connection between the northern mythology and some of the popular superstitions of these islands, we concur. At times, when we were most disposed to ridicule his positions, his learning stepped forward to his aid, and if it did not secure for him all our patience, at all events it commanded much of our respect. Athenaeum, October 2nd. Dr. Bell, whose long residence in Germany, and intimate acquaintance with the popular literature of that country, entitles him to speak with great authority upon all questions relating to the mythology of the Teutonic race, has just published a little volume, which will be read with interest by all who, to use the words of Mr. Cately, have a taste for the light kind of philosophy to be found in this subject. Dr. Bell has displayed in the work before us an amount of original investigation so much beyond what is generally found among recent writers upon folklore, that he can well afford to have this slight omission pointed out. Notes and Queries. October 2nd. It is not too much to assert that all that can be said, or has been discovered about the little animal, Puck, is gathered together in Dr. Bell's most amusing and instructive volume, which not only elucidates the mystery which hangs about it, but enters largely into all illustrations of the folklore and the superstitions of all nations, but especially of the earliest religious rites of Northern Europe and the Wends. It has always been a marvel how Shakespeare could have possessed the information which he made available in his plays. Dr. Bell proves that he must have possessed far greater facilities than we are aware of. The work, besides possessing these features, enters into further antiquarian researches of a learned character, and is one which cannot fail to be highly appreciated wherever it makes its way into circulation. Bell's Weekly Messenger, February 26, 1853. Copy of a note, dated Royal Crescent, Cheltenham, August 23, 1852. Accept my best thanks for the first volume of your Puck. It is a most interesting work, and I am astonished at the vast quantity of matter you have brought together on the subject. I say this on just hastily running it over. I must read it carefully. Heartily wishing you success in this volume, and the early appearance of the second, I am, N.C. J. B.S.Th. Doctor of Laws, F.S.A. From Lewes, dated September 26, 1852. Through the kindness of our friend C. R. S.Th., I am favored with a loan of your very curious and interesting book, M. A. L. R. Valuable books, Kentish topography, manuscripts, and C. Puttick and Simpson, auctioneers of literary property, will sell by auction, at their great room, 191. Piccadilly, on Wednesday, March 9th, and 5 following days, Sunday excepted, a large collection of interesting and useful books in most departments of literature, including the works of standard historians, poets, theologians, Greek and Latin classics, and c. numerous works connected with the history of the county of Kent, large collections of Kentish deeds and documents, and c. catalogues will be sent on application, if in the country on receipt of 6 stamps. National Illustrated Library. Volume 25. For March. The Odyssey of Homer, with Flaxman's illustrations, and c. 1 volume edited by the Rev. Theodore Alice Buckley, MACR 8 VO, Cloth 2s, 6d, more. Extra 7s, 6d. Volumes 23 and 24. The Iliad of Homer. Translated into English verse by Alexander Pope. A new edition, with notes, illustrations, and introduction by the Rev. Theodore Alice Buckley M.A., Chaplain of Christ Church, Oxford, editor of translations of Homer, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and c. author of Great Cities of the Ancient World, History of the Council of Trent, and c. 2 volumes Crown 8 VO, Cloth 5s, in more. Extra, for school prizes 2 volumes 15s, or 2 volumes in 1 10s, 60. Ditto calf, marbled edges, 9s. Asterisk. This edition of Homer's Iliad contains the classical compositions of Flaxman, beautifully drawn by T. D. Scott, Esq., and engraved in the most careful manner by J. L. Williams, Esq. The most notable new edition is Pope's Homer, with Flaxman's designs, and a variety of other illustrations, explanatory notes, with parallel passages, by the editor, Mr. Buckley, and an introduction, which gives a judicious estimate of Pope, and enters sensibly into the question of whether there ever was such a man as Homer. Spectator. The Illustrated Family Novelist. March volume. Marie-Louise, or The Opposite Neighbors. Translated from the Swedish of Emily Carlin. Illustrated with 8 fine engravings. Crown 8 VO, cloth 2s, 60, more. Elegant 7s, 60. The Universal Library of the Best Works of the Best Authors. 1. Scott's Lady of the Lake, and Lay of the Last Minstrel. 1s. 2. Isaac Walton's Lives of Donne, Wotton, Herbert, Hooker, and Sanderson. 1s. 3. Enson's Voyage Round the World. 1s. 4. Goldsmith's Vicar of Wakefield, and St. Tyne's Picciola. 1s. 5. Alison's Essay on Taste. 1s. 6. Sterne's Tristram Shandy. 168 pages. 1s. 60. 7. Fables of La Fontaine. Translated from the French by E. Wright. 1s. 8. Sedgwick's Home, Paul and Virginia, The Indian Cottage, and the Exiles of Siberia. With 3 engravings. 120 pages. 1s. 9. Uncle Tom's Cabin. New edition, with portrait and memoir of Mrs. Harriet Beecher Stowe, a digest of the slave laws of the Southern States of America, and statistics of American slavery since the Declaration of Independence. 180 pages. 1s. 60. 10. Kaempfer's Japan. March number. 1s. Illustrated London Library. Volume 4. Laura's and Penates, or Cilicia and its Governors. Being a short historical account of that province, from the earliest times to the present day. Together with a description of some household gods of the ancient Cilicians, broken up by them on their conversion to Christianity, and first discovered and brought to this country by the author, William Burkhardt Barker, Amarius, many years resident at Tarsus in an official capacity. Edited by William Francis Ainsworth, FRGS, FGS Demi 8 VO, cloth 6s, calf, marbled edges 10s, 60, more. Elegant 12s. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. Acts 21. 39. It is a work of much research, evincing an extensive knowledge of the topography of that portion of Asia Minor to which it refers. The illustrations are unusually numerous and well executed, and there is also a map of Cilicia compiled from the most authentic sources. Morning Advertiser. A more complete and authentic assortment of these curious objects, household gods, it were difficult to bring together. Globe. Illustrated Educational Works. Recently published. The first 6 books of Euclid. With numerous exercises. Printed on a new plan, with accurately executed diagrams. Demi 8 VO, cloth 2s. The Illustrated Practical Geometry. Edited by Robert Scott Byrne, editor of the Illustrated London Drawing Book. Demi 8 VO, cloth 2s. First Lessons in Arithmetic on a New Plan. By Hugo Reed, Esq., late Principal of the People's College, Nottingham, and author of numerous educational works. Demi 8 VO, cloth 2s. Mechanics and Mechanism. By Robert Scott Byrne. With about 250 illustrations. Demi 8 VO, cloth 2s. Webster's Dictionary of the English Language. Royal 8 VO, cloth 16s. Ingram, Cook & Company's Illustrated Catalogue, new and enlarged edition, is now ready, and may be had gratis, on application, or by post, on receipt of 6 postage stamps. London, Ingram, Cook & Company, 227. Strand, and sold by all booksellers. Just published, pages 720, plates 24, price 21s. A History of Infusorial Animalcules, living and fossil, with descriptions of all the species, and abstracts of the systems of Ehrenberg, Dujardin, Cutzing, Siebold, and C. by Andrew Pritchard, Esq., MRI. Also, price 5s. A General History of Animalcules, with 500 engravings. Also, price 8s, 6d. Micrographia, or Practical Essays on Microscopes. London, Whitaker and Company, Ave Maria Lane. New Books. Minutiae Feliciis Octavius. The Octavius of Minutius Felix, with an introduction, analysis, and English notes, by the Rev. H. A. Holden, M.A., Fellow of Trinity College. Edited for the Syndics of the Cambridge University Press. Post 8 vo. 9s. 60. A full and exact collation of about 20 Greek manuscripts of the Holy Gospels, hitherto unexamined, deposited in the British Museum, the Archiepiscopal Library at Lambeth, N.C., with a critical introduction by the Rev. F. H. Scrivener, M.A., Headmaster of Falmouth School. 8 vo. 6s. Caesar Morgan on the Trinity of Plato, and of Philo Judaeus, and of the effects which an attachment to their writings had upon the principles and reasonings of the Fathers of the Christian Church. Edited for the Syndics of the Cambridge University Press, by H. A. Holden, M.A., Fellow of Trinity College. Post 8 vo. 4s. The Holy City, Jerusalem described, by George Williams, B.D., Fellow of King's College, Cambridge. Second edition, with additions, and a plan of Jerusalem, from the Ordnance Survey. 2 volumes 8 vo. 2l. 5s. The plan separately, with a memoir, 9s, mounted on rollers, 18s. History of the Holy Sepulchre, by Professor Willis, M.A., F.R.S. with original illustrations. Reprinted from Williams's Holy City. 8 vo. 9s. Outlines of Ecclesiastical History, before the Reformation. By the Rev. W. H. Hoare, M.A., late Fellow of St. John's College, Cambridge. Uniformly with Outlines of Sacred History. 2s. 60. Gospel Narrative, according to the authorized text, with a continuous exposition and notes. By John Forster, M.A., Her Majesty's Chaplain of the Savoy. 4th edition, revised. Royal 8 vo. 12s. Churchman's Theological Dictionary. By Robert Eden, M.A., Examining Chaplain to the Bishop of Norwich. 2nd edition. 5s. Manual of Christian Antiquities, an account of the constitution, ministers, worship, discipline, and customs of the early Church, with a complete analysis of the works of the Ante-Nicene Fathers. By the Rev. Joseph E. Riddle, M.A. 2nd edition. 8 vo. 18s. Manual of Antiquities of the Christian Church, translated and adapted to the use of the English Church, from the German of Garricky, by A. J. W. Morrison, B.A., Headmaster of Grammar School, Truro. 5s. 60. The Statutes relating to the ecclesiastical and eleemosynary institutions of England, Ireland, India, and the colonies, with the decisions thereon. By A. J. Stevens, M.A., F.R.S., Barrister at Law. 2 volumes 8 vo. 3l. 3s. Beds or 3l. 13s. 60. In Law Calf. London, John W. Parker and Son, West Strand. Printed by Thomas Clark Shaw, of No. 8. New Street Square, at No. 5. New Street Square, in the parish of St. Bride, in the City of London, and published by George Bell, of No. 186. Fleet Street, in the parish of St. Dunstan in the West, in the City of London, publisher, at No. 186. Fleet Street aforesaid. Saturday, March 5, 1853. Thomas Clark Shaw. George Bell.